Who better to tell you if any of this is a good deal? Because I bought all this bullshit. Fellas, Nintendo prices have always been all over the place. Sometimes they give you a good deal. Other times, there isn't a blue moon. Alright, I think that's a little bit of hyperbole because Nintendo sometimes actually does try to give like a pretty good value with their products. Of course, in recent memory, they don't really give a damn. But it's not like Nintendo is like overly changed or anything. I mean, there's been numerous cases in the past where not only did Nintendo have the most expensive thing on the market, but they also didn't give a damn. They ripped you the hell off. But more recently, with the Nintendo Switch 2 and throughout the Nintendo Switch generation, Nintendo's definitely been a lot ballsier with their prices, and they definitely want to kind of push a certain level of value to the consumers of like, hey, we give you the greatest things known to man, so of course our things are going to be priced the way they are. But as we're about to see, that very rarely ever makes a ton of sense because they aren't even very consistent about this kind of stuff. But I kind of compiled a list of things that have had controversial price points, and some things that I think are genuinely great deals, or some things that, you know, just have weird prices to discuss. So a bunch of this stuff is pretty much within the past, like, couple generations of Nintendo. Technically speaking, we could go back to like the 90s and stuff and their price points during that era, but to be honest, I don't really think that's fair because I was not buying things in the 90s. At my oldest, I was 3 in the 90s, so you know, I don't really think I can have a really great gauge as to what's a great deal and what wasn't a great deal, other than just trying to put myself in the shoes of people who were living through the 90s. So for the most part, we're kind of going Wii era to Nintendo Switch 2 era. All right, so let's start with Mario Kart World. Oh, Christ. Nintendo decided to price Mario Kart World at $80 just because they can. I would never say Mario Kart World didn't launch with a substantial amount of content. Strangely enough, you know, the amount of new tracks in the game compared to any other modern Mario Kart game is a bit lower. You know, they have 30 traditional tracks in Mario Kart World compared to what we usually get being 32 in most games as a base level at launch. But, you know, considering the fact that a lot of the retro tracks that returned in Mario Kart World are pretty substantially redesigned, more so than I think we've seen ever before. Something like Peach Beach in Mario Kart World, you could just flat out consider that to be a brand new track. And then in addition to that, you know, you have more characters than ever before. You have Knockout Tour, you have free roam mode, all of this stuff. And some of it doesn't come together as much as I would really want it to, but I don't think you could really claim this game does not have a substantial amount of content. Definitely more than enough to be a full-priced Mario Kart game and a successor to, at the very least, Mario Kart 8, what that was at its launch. Of course, as a successor to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which was priced at $60, and then with the Booster Course Pass DLC, that was $25, so yeah, in total, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, when all is said and done, costs $85. And yeah, I think Mario Kart World looks a lot worse then. Okay, I really like Mario Kart World, but is it worth $80? No. You know, to be fair, a lot of people paid $50 for it because you have the Nintendo Switch 2 bundle at $500, where, you know, it's $50 more than the console alone at $450, including Mario Kart World, $50. So, you know, I mean, for $50, yeah, that game is great. That's a steal. But we're just talking the standalone price of the game at $80. I would put it in meh deal territory. It's not a good deal. I don't think it's worth it, but it's also not like this complete and utter ripoff, you know, because when Mario Kart World released, $70 was considered like this is the price point AAA games launch at. Of course, $70 was already a bit of a controversial price hike for many games, but you know, that's the standard. And Mario Kart World, they thought it's, hey, this is $10 more than the standard. And I don't really see that. You know, $10, it's annoying, but I wouldn't call that a complete ripoff. More so, this isn't a good deal, buddy, and I don't think this is worth it, but I would say there are worse deals than Mario Kart World's price. And also, Nintendo did give the option for the first few months of the Nintendo Switch 2's launch of, like, getting Mario Kart World for only $50. So, yeah, I'd put this around meh deal. It's not great, and it's definitely one of the easiest prices to clown on, but I would say there have been worse price points in the past. So hell, let's talk about potentially one. Super Mario Galaxy plus Super Mario Galaxy 2 for Nintendo Switch. What a funny little package this is. Now, these are two of my favorite games of all time. Mario Galaxy 1 is my favorite game of all time. Galaxy 2 is definitely at least in like the top 20. I mean, that game is phenomenal. And this release was always kind of a strange one, but I mean, it kind of makes sense. You had Super Mario 3D All-Stars in 2020, where you had 64, Sunshine, and Galaxy 1. And Galaxy 2 was very infamously not included in that package. And, you know, just years went by with nothing. No Galaxy 2, no nothing, not at all, no Galaxy 2, nothing. But of course, what better time to do this release than for Mario's 40th anniversary, when for Mario's 35th, you already re-released half of this damn package with Mario Galaxy 1. But now they have incentive to do it because they have to tie this into the Super Mario Galaxy movie. Okay. It would have been kind of cool if they actually re-released Mario 3D All-Stars and then for like a Nintendo Switch 2 edition of the game or something, or as like just a DLC upgrade, they included Mario Galaxy 2 as like a little like added thing. So then if you already bought Mario 3D All-Stars, maybe you could just buy the Mario Galaxy 2 DLC and then you'd get that game. But I understand why they did it in this kind of more convoluted way. You know, when 3D All-Stars released, we didn't have any of those games available on Switch in any way. Since then, you know, we've gotten Mario 64 and Mario Sunshine on Nintendo Switch Online. So then that basically left Mario Galaxy as the only game that you couldn't actually play on Nintendo Switch or Nintendo Switch 2, since 3D All-Stars had been delisted long ago. And Galaxy 2 just straight up wasn't there, and Nintendo was like, well, shit. We got this Mario Galaxy movie coming out. Well, you surely need to be able to play the Galaxy games. And now, with Nintendo Switch Online and this bundle, you can play all of the 3D Marios that anybody actually gives a fuck about. Now, this wasn't a limited time release, so I do appreciate that. And I also do appreciate the fact that this isn't really like a traditional compilation. It's one of these Nintendo Switch games where when you put the cartridge in the system, just the two games pop up on the home menu, which makes it so then if you just want to buy these games digitally, you can pick which one you want. You don't need to buy both of them, which is definitely a good thing. If you already bought 3D All-Stars and you want Galaxy 2, you can just buy Galaxy 2 by itself. One problem: these games separately are $40 fucking dollars. With the bundle, they're $70, which is kind of a rare price point that you see Nintendo Switch 1 games priced at. You know, you had Tears of the Kingdom at $70. You had Mortal Kombat 1. But you know, I've found that a lot of these kind of bundles of games generally have the biggest excuses to price them above $60. I remember, you know, the Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster Collection. I think that was at like $75 because that's considered a bundle of 6 games. So, you know, oh man, obviously you can't price that at $60. These Galaxy 1 and 2 re-releases, I think they try to like make them seem like they're more than they really are. You know, this isn't just a straight up, you know, re-release of the 3D All-Stars Galaxy 1 version. You know, they kind of went in and they adjusted a couple of things here and there. Added more storybook pages. This is nothing, man. I mean, the games still look gorgeous, but you look at how these games look, and it's not like they really did much at all to them. Do I think Galaxy and Galaxy 2 on their own, like in a vacuum, are those experiences worth $40? Yeah, of course, they're some of the greatest games of all time. But the problem is, these are games that have existed for over a decade at this point. They've been re-released numerous times for significantly cheaper prices, and the amount of things that they've done to these games, I don't think warrants them kind of charging more premium prices for this. Now, of course, like more premium prices, like, well, you know, the games by themselves are only $40. And that is cheaper than other Wii releases I've seen, you know, like something like Skyward Sword HD. But Skyward Sword HD definitely had more work done to it. I don't know. I just don't think, like, even if they would have priced this bundle at $60 and both games would have been like $30 by themselves, like, yeah, I think that still would have been too pricey, but it would have made a lot more sense instead of this game literally being one of the very few Nintendo Switch 1 games that went over that $60 price point. I love the Galaxy games, but I'm probably gonna put this in bad deal territory. But this brings up an interesting point because Nintendo also did Pikmin 1 plus 2 for Nintendo Switch. And that's kind of a similar setup to Galaxy 1 plus 2. You know, you have the two games kind of bundled together, and, you know, they're both separate digital releases. And when you put the cartridge in your Switch, then, you know, like they both appear on the home screen. It's not like you have like a dedicated menu interface or whatever. Now, Pikmin 1 and 2 is $50, and both games separately on the eShop are $30 a pop. So it's actually a very similar setup to Galaxy 1 plus 2, but I think Nintendo kind of considers Galaxy 1 and 2 to be more premium titles because they are, you know, newer games. They're also Mario games, so, you know, Nintendo likes to make sure that old brand is considered cream of the crop kind of garbage. And truthfully, I don't think Nintendo really did as much to Pikmin 1 and 2. You know, there's not really any new content. And in fact, you know, like as much as these are the most accessible versions of Pikmin 1 and 2, and there is like a new control option with this game where, you know, you can use some very slight gyro aiming with, you know, your cursor. In some cases, I would say the Wii versions of Pikmin 1 and 2 still feel the best. You know, using that Wii Remote pointer is just still like unmatched. But I do kind of feel like a similar amount of work was put into both of these re-releases. The main difference is Pikmin 1 and 2 are much older games, and Galaxy 1 and 2 just look a whole lot better if you just put them in HD. You just crank up the resolution on those games, and they end up looking, honestly, like better than some new games you see released these days. Pikmin 1 and 2, I appreciate that they're in HD in this bundle, but yeah, they don't age the hottest. They're still fine looking games, but you know, there is definitely a bit of a difference here. But why I think Pikmin 1 and 2 are a better deal, and it's not just because they're cheaper and because like, oh, them two together is $50, which I think is a much more fair price for two GameCube games. I think it should be a little lower, but I think that's a far fairer price than $70 for two Wii games. My thing is, you couldn't already play Pikmin 1 and 2 on Nintendo Switch. It was impossible before this re-release. Galaxy 1 was already on Switch, on one of its best-selling games, like 3D All-Stars. Even though it was a limited time release, that damn thing sold like over 10 million copies. So it's like, it's not even like Galaxy 1 was like, oh man, you need this on Switch. And that game at $40 when 3D All-Stars was a $60 release. It's like, what the hell is going on here? This is crazy. I don't really have a problem with Pikmin 1 and 2 being the way it is. I'm kind of teetering between fair deal and meh deal, but I think like Pikmin 1 and 2 isn't really as offensive as Mario Kart World. It's fine. I don't think it's like a steal or anything, but I don't think it's anything to get that worked up over, especially because we're going to jump over to the Wii era with the new Play Control lineup of games. And I think this is interesting because this lineup included Pikmin 1 and Pikmin 2, and new Play Control games were generally priced at $30 a pop, which is the same as what Pikmin 1 and 2 cost individually on Nintendo Switch. So a new Play Control on Wii, you know, this launched around like 2009 here in North America, and we got Mario Power Tennis, Pikmin 1, Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, and that was kind of it for a bit. We ended up getting Metroid Prime Trilogy later down the line, which Metroid Prime 1 and 2 were new Play Control titles in Japan, but here in North America, they bundled it all together with Metroid Prime 3 and just re-released, you know, everything for $50 flat out. And then Pikmin 2 was in this weird purgatory. Nintendo put that out as a new Play Control title in Japan and Europe, not North America, for the longest time until like summer of 2012, like right before the Wii U launched. They re-released Pikmin 2 for like $20. You know, it was labeled as a Nintendo Selects game, so it was $20. So, you know, I mean, that was a good deal, but it was also kind of like, they obviously just put that out because they were like, oh, we got nothing this year until the Wii U launches. You know, new Play Control is a weird thing because on one hand, they picked games that could benefit from Wii Remote controls. For the most part, these games look very similar to their original GameCube releases. You know, they're in widescreen now, which is a plus, but for the most part, like Pikmin 1 looks like Pikmin 1, you know? And these games have definitely been kind of tweaked in multiple ways. I think Mario Power Tennis is one of the lamer ones because it's just Mario Power Tennis again with just like, oh, now you swing the Wii remote to swing your racket. And it doesn't even feel that great in that game, so it's like, eh. But like I said, I would consider the new play control version of Pikmin 1 and 2 to be the definitive versions of those games. Yes, the HD versions do look nicer, but there's something about those games with a Wii remote and nunchuck, man. It works so perfectly. But what do I think is a better deal? The $30 version of these games on Wii, or the $30 version of these games on Nintendo Switch? Here's the thing. At this time, in 2009, the Wii was backwards compatible with GameCube games. So you could already play all of these games on the Wii. You know, you just had to find the physical disc and all of that. And sure, you couldn't play with a Wii remote and nunchuck, but it's not like the new play control games looked substantially better or played substantially better. Like, Pikmin with a Wii remote is better than Pikmin with a GameCube controller, but I think that implies that Pikmin with a GameCube controller is like dog ass. And it's not. It still works like really well. You know, it's just that the Wii remote controls are really, really good. The GameCube controller still works fine. And Donkey Kong Jungle Beat was a part of this, and I think having the Wii remote controls makes that game far more accessible, but that game was originally designed to be used with the DK bongos, and I think as annoying as it is to use those damn bongos, I think that makes that game stand out so much more playing with the bongos compared to playing with a Wii remote and nunchucks. So that's just the thing. Like, I don't think $30 was a bad deal for these games, but you could already play them all on the Wii in many ways. I don't know. I think fair deal is fair. You know, Nintendo wasn't really trying to like mask these games as like brand new releases or anything. Like, they all had the same kind of box art of like new play control. Play this classic GameCube game with new Wii remote controls. Like, they weren't trying to mask them as like brand new Wii releases or anything. Like, they were pretty straightforward with what these things were. And I think $30 makes sense. You know, I think that's kind of like the upper limit of what you could have priced these at. But overall, yeah, it was an okay deal. All right, let's go with another Wii deal. Now, during the Wii era, I think Nintendo was all about just trying to get you into this damn ecosystem. You know, I think at this time, you saw a lot better like bundle prices and all of that stuff with like accessories included, controllers included, all of this, because I think the video game industry had more to prove at that time. They were trying to, you know, bring everybody in, especially Nintendo with the Wii and all of that. So that's why we got stuff like the Wii Play Wii Remote bundle, and you know, for like $50 for that thing. Might as well talk about that right now. I think the Wii Play bundle, you know what? I might do it. I know Wii Play got a ton of shit from back in the day. Like a lot of people considered this game to be ass. But I'm gonna put this in the good deal territory, because why wouldn't you do Wii Play for $50? You got a Wii remote included, and a Wii remote on its own was $40. So you just got like this brand new Wii game included during the height of the Wii era. Like, this was in early 2007, just right after launch. You get an extra controller and you get a game in there. And even if you think most of the games in Wii Play are garbage, hey, you'll find at least one you give a damn about. You can't tell me something like Tanks doesn't wet your damn whistle. I think Wii Play is a good deal. And I was considering putting it in Amazing Deal. However, I think we got an even better deal. Over on the Wii U, we had Wii Party U for $50. The exact same setup as Wii Play here. The only thing is, I do have much better memories of Wii Play compared to Wii Party U. But Wii Party U is more of a full-fledged game. Like, it's more of a full-featured game. Wii Party on the Wii was $50 on its own. So now you have Wii Party U, its sequel, and it's a fully fleshed out sequel. It has everything you'd expect from a Wii Party sequel, and it's $50 as well. And you get a Wii Remote Plus, a Wii Remote Plus with Motion Plus included. And there's like this dumbass little Wii U gamepad stand included, because there's like a bunch of games in Wii Party U where you put the gamepad on like a coffee table and you play like looking down at the screen. And if you didn't have this one little like gamepad stand, the gamepad's triggers would constantly like fire off and the gamepad would be like lopsided. So Sure, another hunk of fucking plastic included for free. This game is an amazing deal, even though Wii Party U is definitely kind of like a 6 out of 10 game. But so is Wii Play. I just have better memories of Wii Play because it was damn Wii Play, man. Come on. Laser hockey. Come on. Now, continuing with the Wii bundle tradition, how about the Wii Zapper? This kind of always fluctuated between like 20 bucks and $25. I remember seeing it for like $19.99, maybe at like GameStop, but then at like Walmart, it was like $24.99. I don't know. The Wii Zapper included Link's crossbow training as the bundle pack-in game, and I think that makes sense. You know, like the Wii Zapper is supposed to be a gun peripheral. You know, they didn't want to do Wii Kill as a bundle, so it makes sense they would want to do something a little more like mature, and they decided to reuse Twilight Princess assets and make a shooting gallery kind of game with Link, which is weird because Link has never really used a crossbow, but he is now. It's kind of weird. Like, you'd almost expect them to do, like, why not do like a Metroid Prime kind of game or something like that, because, you know, Metroid Prime is your shooty bang bang kind of game, even though it's not really bang bang, more so just shoot sometimes. And it's more of like an adventure. And, you know, they could have done a Metroid thing, and they would have been able to reuse assets as well for that, because Metroid Prime 3 came out before the Wii Zapper. But Twilight Princess came out like a year before the Wii Zapper launched, so I guess like it kind of just lined up a little better. And you know, I mean, Link's crossbow training is a damn fun game. I think Link's crossbow training is super enjoyable. It is really short, you know, they only have like a handful of stages, and it is all about kind of a score attack kind of thing. It's all about just, hey, go for the high score, try to get something good here. But everything is laid out really well. It has a great presentation. It looks good. It sounds good. It functions well. It's a very solid, small, high score based release. So would I say Link's crossbow training by itself, is that worth 20 bucks? You know, comparing that to other Wii games that released around the $20 range, I would say Link's crossbow training feels kind of like a $10 release. Like, I think it's a damn fun game, but you run through that whole thing in about an hour. And, you know, you can keep coming back to it if you want to, but for the most part, you know, it is kind of just like a very small kind of just like, here's something to do for a bit. And that's all it really is. The Wii Zapper itself, some people like the Wii Zapper. I don't think it's like bad or anything, but I've never been a huge Wii Zapper supporter. I think compared to other Wii accessories, stuff like the Wii Wheel, where you literally just smack the Wii remote in there. There's nothing you gotta do. There's nothing you gotta think about. It just fits into the wheel, and that's it. Compared to that, the Wii Zapper is definitely more of a project to, you know, get that thing all set up. You know, you got to put the nunchuck in, and you got to wrap the wire around a certain coil, and you're hiding wires, and you got to like take off pieces. And I'm making it sound worse than it is, but you know, it's just not as immediately like, wow, this is awesome. This my Wii remote's a gun now. Like, in my opinion, the Wii remote feels a lot more like a gun with a lot of those like third-party handgun accessories. And you know, like, I think the Wii Zapper is better engineered and works better for like, you know, games where you're actually like supposed to move around, you know, something like an actual first-person shooter. I think it works decently well. But for the most part, I think I would rather just be able to hold the Wii remote and nunchuck, you know, to the side right here, rather than, you know, have it held like this. Like, it's not my favorite thing in the world. But overall, 25 bucks. The Wii Zapper isn't necessary whatsoever. It is literally just a hunk of plastic. But Link's crossbow training is pretty fun. But honestly, when I play Link's crossbow training, I'm not even going to use the Wii Zapper. The Wii Zapper is one of the most unnecessary things to buy for the Wii. But I would honestly say the Wii Wheel is more unnecessary. Like, yeah, it's kind of cute, but it's also like, this doesn't really do anything. I think the Wii Zapper honestly does more, even if I dislike it more than the Wii Wheel. And Link's crossbow training is really fun. I would put this in fair deal. I wouldn't say it's like a good deal, because a good deal is more of kind of like a bit of a no-brainer. I think a fair deal is something where it's just like, you can be convinced, but it's also not like, oh my God, stop the fucking presses. Are you seeing that Wii Zapper at 20 bucks? Okay, so I'm gonna wanna go back to more modern Nintendo. Let's talk about Nintendo Switch 2 software. So the second AAA game Nintendo released on Nintendo Switch 2 was Donkey Kong Bonanza at $70. And I just kind of want to mention this because this was one of the other first games Nintendo priced at $70. And I think Donkey Kong Bonanza, I didn't really feel any problem with that being $70. Other than, like, is there, like, substantially more content here than with something like Super Mario Odyssey? And I don't really think so. And that's not to say that Donkey Kong Bonanza doesn't have enough content. It definitely has more than enough content to play around with. I just find that, like, it is very comparable to Super Mario Odyssey content-wise. In terms of just how much there is to do and how much there is to 100%, all of that stuff. I wouldn't say Donkey Kong Bonanza is an amazing deal. I don't think, like, this is, like, wow, this is one of the greatest values in all of gaming, especially considering they released the DK Island and Emerald Rush DLC for it, like, 2 months after the game launched, and that was $20. And that DLC is definitely kind of controversial because DK Island is really well designed and it's really cool. But it does kind of feel like this was content that was held back. Like, this was developed for the game before it launched, and then they just kind of held it back, maybe worked on it a little bit more, and then released it as separate DLC. And many people have already mentioned, you can make some easy comparisons where DK Island is kind of like this cool little post-game nostalgia zone where you have all these little references and stuff, and just this big area from the series past to explore, much like how Mario Odyssey had the Mushroom Kingdom. But even then, the Mushroom Kingdom had actual, like, content in it. Like, there was a bunch of stuff for you to do in the Mushroom Kingdom to get, like, more power moons and everything. Where DK Island doesn't have that. It's kind of just like a cute little thing to just check out. And then you have the Emerald Rush mode, which is cool. You know, like, there's definitely some stuff to do with that. But overall, like, the DLC of Bonanza feels like it was almost ripped from the original game, though the original game doesn't really feel lacking in terms of content. So I would put Bonanza in the fair deal territory. I don't think it's an amazing value at that price. It's just a normal value. It feels like a normal video game. The DLC is weird, but I mean, just talking about the base game at $70, I think it's fair. It doesn't blow my mind at that price point, but it's also like, yeah, sure, worth 70 bucks, why not? Now, let's talk about another Donkey Kong game. I'm going to be talking about Donkey Kong Country Returns HD, the other 2025 Donkey Kong release. This might be one of Nintendo's worst little endeavors ever, and I love Donkey Kong Country Returns. This is honestly one of my favorite 2D platformers, right alongside Tropical Freeze, and I've talked about the Tropical Freeze price debacle enough, how the Switch release was $60, and yeah, that game was $50 initially on Wii U, which is stupid. But I just want to talk about Country Returns HD because I think this is even worse than that whole situation. Now, to be fair, at the time of Tropical Freeze's Nintendo Switch release, it was a 4-year-old game. So it was still fairly new, all things considered. But of course, there were multiple things where it's like, again, Tropical Freeze launched at $50, and then it got a Nintendo Selects re-release for 20 bucks on Wii U. And then after that, then it's just like, all right, now it's a full price game for some reason on Switch. And it really didn't add much. They added the funky mode, which, whoa, look at all that value. But overall, I would say the Nintendo Switch version of Tropical Freeze is the definitive version of that game. Even if it isn't the most, like, flashy port in the world, like, there's really not much to it. It's kind of just like, here's Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze again. Now, Returns HD is interesting because I do think it was a port that was warranted, and it wasn't at the same time. It's funny because in hindsight, it almost feels like Nintendo pumped this game out because they were like, okay, we're swapping over to this new Donkey Kong design. So if we really want to put out the original Donkey Kong Country Returns again, we have to do it right fucking now. And it's funny because the exact day Returns HD released was when the Nintendo Switch 2 was revealed, where you saw like a glimpse at the new Donkey Kong design. So it almost feels like this weird thing Nintendo wanted to do, because pretty much after that new design was revealed, and it was revealed for Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza, like you started to see all of these like Donkey Kong renders get swapped out for the new design. But more notably, Donkey Kong Country Returns was always kind of in a weird place where the original on Wii was fantastic. Ran at 60 frames per second, looked beautiful on that console. But a big problem was they had forced motion controls with a lot of things. Now, when you actually play the game and you just kind of get into it, they're not that bad, but it's also just not ideal. Like, I'm totally okay with motion control, but like shaking the damn Wii remote to do a roll in a very difficult 2D platformer where you want to be precise, you don't want to anything up, yeah, that's annoying. But thankfully you had Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D on the 3DS, and with that game, you know, they just use button control, which is great. Problem is, it doesn't look as good, and it runs at 30 frames per second. So life sucks. We can't have anything nice. They also added like a whole new world of levels in the 3DS version, which was substantial. So I think, you know, the whole idea is like, what if there was an HD remaster of this game that, you know, had the smooth frame rate and better visuals of the Wii game, but then you had all the content and button controls of the 3DS game, and boom, that's the concept behind Donkey Kong Country Returns HD. It's $60 at just the straight up price of a brand new game. This is what's really weird about Nintendo's pricing on Nintendo Switch, because eventually they just started to price literally everything at $60, or nearly everything at $60. They held back with Mario vs. Donkey Kong. That was $50. Whoa. But even then, something like Mario vs. Donkey Kong feels like a substantially higher effort than Donkey Kong Country Returns HD, because like they fully remade that GBA game. Donkey Kong Country Returns HD was developed by Forever Entertainment, and this company gets a lot of flack, and justifiably so in many cases. What I like about Forever Entertainment is this is a company that I don't know how they're doing it, but they work with all of these legendary game studios, Square Enix, Sega, and also now Nintendo, where I feel like they make a proposition to these companies they can't refuse. They probably work incredibly cheap, and they're willing to do remakes of games that these companies don't want to deal with themselves. So Sega and Forever Entertainment work together on the Panzer Dragoon remake, and you know, I believe Forever Entertainment themselves published it. Same with like the House of the Dead remakes and all of that. Feels like it's something where they go to Sega and they get the license for it. And you know, this is something where Sega probably wasn't interested in doing this stuff on their own, and Forever Entertainment's just like, hey, we'll do it. Why not? And they always do a good enough job for the most part. Like, you know, like, oh, it's in HD and it's the same game fundamentally, but they just lack a lot of attention to detail. A lot of their remakes feel incredibly kind of cheap and cobbled together, but not too much so where it literally feels like broken or unplayable or anything. But they just feel like a very C-tier developer. But the thing is, they'll handle all the remakes of stuff nobody else wants to handle, so I think they've gotten pretty far with that, I guess. I don't know. I don't know why Forever Entertainment gets all of this work, but apparently they went into a collaboration with Nintendo, and the first potential game a part of this partnership was Donkey Kong Country Returns HD. Somehow they still kind of fucked up a lot of stuff with this game. I have no idea how that happens. In many cases, this game does look nice, like they did some decent work kind of touching things up, but there's a lot of problems here and there that pop up with just some attention to detail. Some animations play in weird ways. Some effects are missing, / they play in the wrong areas. All of this stuff. I think there's like a big problem with the game's co-op mode. The co-op mode on Donkey Kong Country Returns HD doesn't really function very well. But yeah, there was this thing in the Wii version of the game where, you know, if the first player would bounce off of an enemy, there would still be a chunk of time where the second player could bounce off of that same enemy, because there are numerous parts in DKC Returns where you pretty much have to bounce off of an enemy to proceed in the level. Like it functions as a genuine platform in the game. It's not like you're just jumping off of that enemy for fun. And that was a part of the Wii game. You know, it gave that second player a window to bounce off of an enemy. And I believe that was not featured in the 3DS version, so that was a problem in the 3DS version, but it's also a major problem in the Nintendo Switch version. Now, with the 3DS version, I almost can excuse that slightly because, you know, it's the 3DS, and, you know, a co-op 2D platformer on the 3DS, it's not the best platform for something like that. You know, I don't want to excuse that glitch being in the 3DS version too much, but I just think it's way worse in the Nintendo Switch game because, like, you know, like, for a game like this, like, even in trailers, during Nintendo Directs, they really push the fact that this is a co-op 2D platformer. And the fact that they had to capture cooperative footage of this game for trailers and everything like that, and they kept on missing this bug for some reason. They just didn't even think about this bug being a thing. Blows my mind. And the fact that this game on the Wii launched at $50. And then there was a Nintendo Selects re-release of that game on Wii for $20. And then on the 3DS, you got it for $40. So it was already cheaper on the 3DS with more content. And then that 3DS version also got re-released as a Nintendo Selects game for $20. So now this Nintendo Switch version, which doesn't add any new content, it's literally kind of just like an HD version of the 3DS game, with new problems that weren't problems before. Yeah, it's $60. Now, I played a ton of this HD re-release, and I did like it, but, you know, I could very easily tell, like, just like, yeah, this is a little sloppier than I would have preferred it being, and there are a lot of problems with it. So overall, I'm kind of going between bad deal and complete ripoff. Like I said, like, I almost feel like the difference between a bad deal and a complete ripoff is the complete ripoff, there's like no value here. Like, what the hell is the point of this? And I wouldn't say Donkey Kong Country Returns HD filled any kind of like void in the Nintendo Switch 1's lineup. Rather, it was something that I think needed to happen just for the sake of the Donkey Kong series. Just having that game available on modern platforms, I think, was a very good thing, and I'm very happy it was. But it's not like this game does anything substantially better or different compared to, like, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, which was already available. It's definitely one of those weird Nintendo games. We all know them. Something like a Super Mario 3D Land. Like, I would love if Super Mario 3D Land got re-released on modern platforms. Do we need that, though? Overall, I think it goes into the bad tier column. I have a hard time recommending this to anybody, even though I love this game, and I did really enjoy this remaster, but I really enjoyed this remaster because I wanted to play Donkey Kong Country Returns again, not because I thought this was a fantastic remaster or anything. All right, folks, I want to talk about some special editions of games here. Firstly, I want to bring us to the Wii U era because we had the Legend of Zelda Wind Waker HD special edition released only at GameStop for only $10 extra. So that game originally launched at $50, you know, standalone, just the game itself. But then for $10 extra at $60, you got this version with a big old box that included a Ganondorf figurine. And yeah, I would put that in a good deal. You know, I wouldn't put it an amazing deal because, like, the figurine is cool. It's a nice figurine, but it is very much kind of like a, you know, a hollow, kind of cheaper figurine. But, you know, I feel like Nintendo could have gone away with charging $20 extra for something like this. You know, you get a really nice big old box, and, you know, the figure is cool. It's a decent figure, but, you know, it definitely kind of feels like it's cheaper kind of Amiibo quality, like back when Amiibo first launched. You know, the $12.99 Amiibo, still good, but it's also kind of like, you know, it's like a $10 figure. That's what it is. Like, it's just like, and, you know, they charge $10 for it, so I'm like, you know, that's pretty good. It's a good deal. It's interesting because I would honestly say the follow-up in 2016, Twilight Princess HD, that's honestly an even better deal than the Wind Waker HD Ganondorf bundle, because that came with the Wolf Link Amiibo, which I would say this is like of a far better quality than the Ganondorf figurine. It's just very, very well detailed, and it's an Amiibo, so you can use it in multiple games. It's interactive, and it unlocked like the Cave of Shadows extra dungeon in Twilight Princess HD, and that came standard as Twilight Princess HD's physical release here in North America. Like, every copy came with an Amiibo for $60. You know, yeah, that's a damn good deal. But this is not a part of this discussion because that is just the standard release of the game. What isn't a standard release of a game is the Nintendo World Championships NES Edition Deluxe Set on Nintendo Switch. This released back in 2024. And this game's release was interesting. So this is like a $30 digital-only game, but they released a physical version where the only way you could get this game on a cartridge with a game case, all of that stuff, is by getting this kind of like box set with a bunch of extra stuff for $60. So for $60, you get a $30 game physically and a replica game pack, which is a non-functioning gold NES cartridge, and then a pin set and art cards. I mean, I'm a sucker for this kind of retro crap. When I saw this, I knew I needed to have it. But when I played Nintendo World Championships NES Edition, I realized I'm not the biggest fan of that game. I think it's cute, and I think elements of it are addictive and kind of fun. But I really fell off of it super quick, and I just found it to be like a very, very, very lackluster alternative take on the NES remix from Wii U formula. It's just a bunch of speedrun challenges, and a lot of the speedrun challenges are just boring as hell. It's just like, oh my god, get that coin in 1 second! And I just found that like there's no replayability with any of these challenges. None of these really stick in your mind like a lot of the challenges in NES Remix did. Some of those challenges in NES Remix were kind of cool and interesting. Nintendo World Championships NES Edition just kind of felt like it took the lamest parts of NES Remix and made a game out of it. I'm not going to say it's bad, like, I'm not going to act like I didn't enjoy parts of this experience, but, man, like, I fell off of it pretty quickly, and, yeah, you know, like, I just thought it was kind of a pretty lifeless game, to be honest. But thank God I got the deluxe set, and I got the fake game cartridge. So, yeah, I mean, it is kind of cute and cool. You know, you have a gold NES replica game pack, and, you know, there's absolutely no board or anything on the inside of this thing. It's literally just a plastic shell gold NES game cartridge with nothing on the inside. You know, it makes it sound like it's kind of cool, but there's also like, I don't know. I just feel like there's really no point in me displaying it. A lot of these collector's editions, I just kind of like open up and I'm like, oh wow, neato. And I put it back. You got the pin set here, which is, you know, I mean, they're nice pins. It's kind of cool, especially considering these pins do appear in the actual game. So, you know, that is kind of cool, and they are very high quality looking pins. And then we have art cards, which are literally just the game box arts with a sprite on the back. The art prints are very nice, but it's also kind of like, you know, this is all it is, you know? Yeah, and that's what you get for $60 in addition to a physical copy of the game. Here's the thing. I mean, Nintendo is offering the standalone game digitally for $30, and I think they kind of are inherently saying, like, hey, this is a smaller game, you know? To us, this is almost like, this is kind of a digital-only release. But we know, you know, a lot of you guys like your collectibles, especially considering the Nintendo World Championships is one of the most, you know, elusive collectible game cartridges of all time. You know, it's goes for so much money, so I think it makes sense. And the thing is, all of this stuff is of a good quality, but I don't really think that inherently makes them worth an extra $30. For the most part, I kind of wanted this set simply because I wanted the physical copy of this game. And you know, I was willing to spend $60 because, you know, it is kind of cool, you know, like, I'm like, all right, I'm willing to spend $60 because you get some extra cool stuff. But the extra cool stuff, you know, like, it is kind of to the point where I'm like, yeah, but I didn't really care about opening any of it. Like, it was like, it's cute, I guess. But, you know, like, oh, the art prints, oh, that's kind of cool. But, like, I kind of wish, like, they would have done like an art book instead, or like something with like behind the scenes design documents, or just a historic perspective on like the Nintendo World Championships, or just the NES era in general. I don't know. To me, this collector set isn't awful or anything. It is very well done, but it's a bunch of stuff that, like, none of this is really necessary at all. And the fact that it's twice as expensive as the game standalone, I don't know, man. I might put it in meh deal. But that brings us to a somewhat similar special edition, and that's for Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light. released for Fire Emblem's 30th anniversary. And this is a special edition for a game that was $6 on the Nintendo eShop, and the special edition was $50. So this is difficult to figure out because on one hand, I think this special edition has so much more value than the Nintendo World Championship special edition. It kind of has that meat that I was missing from NWC. You not only have a replica game pack, but it comes in a replica game box that looks pretty damn identical to what you would expect an NES version of the first Fire Emblem to look like. And the game cartridge itself, they don't even try to make this like, oh yeah, it looks like an NES game. No, it's obviously like, it's meant to be like an NES game, but like it's more so like an art piece, like the ceramic art piece. And I think this looks way cooler than the plastic gold shell that you get with NWC. Then they also have this fake Nintendo Power poster as if the game actually released back in the day in North America. And then they also have like this counselor's corner thing on the back, pretty much really playing into the idea of like, what if this game actually released in North America on the NES back in the day. Game comes with a goddamn manual, man. This is awesome. They have the poster, the manual. They have this giant map poster too. Then you also have this giant hardcover art book for the entire series, which is incredible. Like this whole thing. And listen, like I'm cool with Fire Emblem, but I'm not even like a huge fan of the series. But I'm like, this is fucking crazy. However, the biggest problem with this release is that it was $50, which is less expensive than the NWC NES edition. But again, the standalone price for the game is $6 because it is literally just an NES digital download. And that's the other thing. It's just a digital download. You don't get a physical game here. But I'm gonna be honest. Like all of this, like it shows like such a huge attention to detail. It all kind of comes together in the end, and $50 for this giant art book in addition to all these cute little collectibles that had so much more like attention to detail poured into it compared to this guy. I would put this one up into fair deal. This is for a diehard, longtime fan of Fire Emblem, and with that in mind, this is kind of like this beautiful little like, oh wow, the first game has kind of sort of finally officially released in North America. If only they actually made it a physical fucking game card. All right, buddy, I want to talk about some Zelda jargon here. Let's talk about Breath of the Wild first, because I just kind of want to go over a lot of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, because just comparing everything price-wise, like, it just gets a little silly. So the original Breath of the Wild on Nintendo Switch, $60 for that game. I would probably say either amazing deal or good deal. I would probably put it as a good deal. It's a no-brainer kind of thing, but I wouldn't say it's just like, oh my god, all of this for $60? I think my thing is like, you can definitely see areas where the developers had to kind of cut a couple corners here and there. There's not a ton of enemy variety. The Divine Beasts are kind of lackluster dungeons, and there's only 4 of them. All the shrines look the exact same, all of this, there's a couple of things you can kind of see, like, okay, they were definitely like, all right, we gotta be reasonable here. But, overall, I mean, Breath of the Wild is kind of a no-brainer at $60. I just wouldn't say it's as crazy as We Party You. But that brings us to the DLC, because this was kind of like a bit of a controversial turning point in Nintendo's history with DLC. Nintendo has always been kind of weird with DLC, at least in the early days during the Wii and 3DS and Wii U era, like right before Nintendo first started doing DLC, they were like, we don't believe in DLC, blah, 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 all of this stuff. But, then when Nintendo starts dabbling in DLC with stuff like New Super Luigi U, for example, on the Wii U, they start to be like, oh, we're only going to do DLC after the game releases, all of this. But then, right before the Nintendo Switch 1 launch and Breath of the Wild launch right alongside it, they announced the expansion pass for Breath of the Wild, which was definitely kind of a funky little decision. If I were them, I probably would have waited a little bit longer to just announce that, but I think they kind of wanted to get some pre-order money in. Here's the thing. I never played a ton of the Breath of the Wild expansion pass. I bought it on Wii U because I thought that would be funny. But yeah, my perception of this has always been, it was never the greatest DLC in the world. It always kind of felt a little like, here's a bunch of random bullshit we just decided to just, here you go, here's some extra stuff. I think what's kind of frustrating is, you know, like they really wanted to push like, hey, the Champions Ballad is DLC Pack 2, where you get to see more about the champions, because some people really did enjoy the champions, and Breath of the Wild story was always a little lighter, so a lot of people were kind of like, we want more story. And the expansion pass kind of just like didn't really care. Like there was like, well, we'll give you some extra story, but we really don't want to. It kind of felt like you were like pulling their teeth to give you more, and they just barely gave you anything of substance, really. Now, at the end of that all, you end up getting like the Master Cycle Zero, which is interesting because I remember that was the bike that Link had in Mario Kart 8, and I think there was a quote that like AJ Numa was like, I really like the Master Cycle. It would be cool if we could put that in an actual Zelda game. And I think the name itself is very interesting, the fact that they call it the Master Cycle Zero, which does directly reference the Master Cycle in Mario Kart 8. So I always thought that was kind of funny how they added the Mario Kart 8 vehicle to Breath of the Wild, and they kind of gave it a name that implied that this is the predecessor to that vehicle. Overall, I never really found the Breath of the Wild DLC to be substantial enough to really be like, oh damn, you really need to get this. It definitely felt like the expansion pass is for diehard fans that desperately want to get more out of Breath of the Wild. And for that, for 20 bucks, Here's the thing, New Super Luigi U was $20, and that effectively gave you brand new levels throughout the entire game, like an entire game's worth of brand new levels. The world map and cutscenes and all that stuff, the graphics, everything was basically the same, but you got brand new levels. The Breath of the Wild expansion pass, again, by comparison, for the same amount of money, it kind of just feels like, here's extra crap to do in Breath of the Wild. It's not necessarily like, oh wow, this is some of Breath of the Wild's best stuff. Like, no, like it's just kind of like, here's some extra stuff to do if you're desperate for more Breath of the Wild. Personally speaking, I'm kind of going between fair deal and meh deal. Out of all of Nintendo's greatest DLC, you know, you look at New Super Luigi U, Splatoon 2's Octo expansion, a lot of the Mario Kart 8 DLC, you know, look at something like the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass. That was 25 bucks. That gave you 48 brand new tracks. That gives the game an incredible amount of extra value. By comparison, I don't really think Breath of the Wild's expansion pass does that. Comparing it to other DLC that you see for AAA open world games, I mean, this is definitely a lot more about like, here's some extra stuff to do in the game, but none of it feels very substantial. It doesn't really feel like here's a bunch of new content. It feels like here's some more stuff to do with the game as it is. I don't even know what I'm saying, man. It's going in meh. Which brings us to the Switch 2 edition of Breath of the Wild. This is baseline Breath of the Wild. It does not include the DLC, and it is $70 for a game that released in 2017. That was also a goddamn Wii U game. So this was kind of a bit of an annoying thing, the fact that the Switch 2 edition at $70 does not include the DLC. However, I think from Nintendo's perspective, this is literally just the base game, and they just want to offer the Switch 2 upgrade. Nothing else is included, and they don't want to include the DLC in that purchase price because, oh, what if people already bought the DLC and they want the Switch 2 edition? Well, what are we gonna do for them? So I'm not really sure how else they could have done it, because the problem is the Switch 2 edition is literally meant to be, this is the base game with the Switch 2 enhancements being the frame rate and visuals, and that's it. We just want it so then if you have baseline Breath of the Wild, you can purchase the $10 upgrade and boom, you're upgraded to the Switch 2 edition. And then how do you include the DLC potentially with that? It kind of sucks, but logistically, I kind of get it. The problem is it's too fucking expensive for the base game. It's 70 bucks for this. That is ridiculous. Now, thankfully, much like with Mario Kart World, Nintendo kind of had some funny little workarounds with it, where if you had Nintendo Switch Online expansion pass, then you just got the upgrade for free. You know, that was kind of just a cool little addition there. So that's something. But the idea of this game as a standalone experience, $70 for Breath of the Wild, and in addition, you would still have to pay for the DLC if you would want the DLC, bringing the grand total of Breath of the Wild on Switch 2, the complete experience. We are talking a $90 game. Which is absurd when this game released in 2017. This is the definitive way to play the game, but overall, when you see everything add up like that, I mean, and I'm just talking the $70 version right here. I'm not talking, hey, the baseline Breath of the Wild and you get the upgrade for free on Nintendo Switch Online Expansion Pass. I'm talking just like the concept of the Switch 2 edition of Breath of the Wild at $70, and not including the DLC. Again, I get why the DLC isn't included, but overall, I mean, like, you look at the price point of all of this all together, and it is absurd. I'm sorry, I think that belongs in bad deal. $90 for the complete Breath of the Wild experience, when honestly, the Switch 2 edition of Tears of the Kingdom is goddamn $80, and that pretty much includes, like, all of the general types of content that you got with the Breath of the Wild DLC. Like, here's path functionality from the DLC is included in Tears of the Kingdom. A lot of the special clothing items are included with Tears of the Kingdom. It's not gonna be a one-to-one thing, but at the same time, I'm just kind of like, that's a little silly. Well, might as well talk about Tears of the Kingdom, because this was Nintendo's first foray into $70 AAA gaming back in 2023. You know, I mean, like, it's a little silly that this game launched at $70. You know, it was kind of like, oh, wow, we're doing this now, huh? Especially considering so much of Tears of the Kingdom's basis is based on Breath of the Wild, the game from 2017. You know, it did kind of feel like, oh, so you kind of did all of this stuff already with Breath of the Wild, and now you're just kind of building on top of that. Breath of the Wild was $60, and that was, like, fully crafted from the ground up. Of course, Tears of the Kingdom has incredibly innovative tech and design, and, like, it's doing so much crazy stuff. It makes sense. I'm not trying to undermine that. But, you know, for the most part, there's a lot you could potentially criticize here. But I feel like I got my money's worth out of Tears of the Kingdom. Did it need to be 70? Probably not. I feel like that was more so Nintendo saying, like, we can do this. You know, it makes sense. This is, like, our biggest game ever, so why not? Was I upset paying $70 for Tears of the Kingdom? I mean, yeah, it was definitely annoying, but I would say this game makes its case enough to be $70. You know, it's a pretty damn big game, and they do a lot of brand new stuff that you really haven't seen done in a video game of this size. So I would say it's a fair deal. Again, I'm not in love with the price point, but I feel like Tears of the Kingdom is a fine deal at $70. You're gonna get a lot out of it. Now, the Switch 2 edition, so, you know, Tears of the Kingdom never got paid DLC, so you don't have that extra cost potentially to add to it. So it is just straight up $80, which, you know, is also ridiculous that the game is $80, but, you know, that kind of puts it in the Mario Kart World territory. You know, thankfully, the game actually runs very well on the Switch 2 edition, so that's a plus. That was kind of annoying, you know, paying $70 for a game that can be potentially as choppy as Tears of the Kingdom can be, but it's not like that bad, really. I never experienced anything like that bad with that game, but now running at 60 frames per second, yeah, I mean, it's cool, but $80 for this game standalone it's a little much. Folks, let's talk about the 3DS at launch. $250 for this sucker. This was one of Nintendo's biggest misfires. I think they priced the 3DS at $250 because they were like, well, it's got that glasses-free 3D display. That's something special. Man, people are gonna want this system just because of that. And they had, like, absolutely no games for this thing for months. The launch lineup is genuinely one of the lamest launch lineups for any system ever. I mean, it had quantity, but barely any quality. There is a couple of good things there. Super Street Fighter 4 3D Edition is genuinely really impressive. And that's pretty much it. Everything else that released on the 3DS was kind of like a 6 out of 10 at best. All these launch titles felt like early DS games. A lot of games that were early on in the DS's life really felt like how iPhone games felt like in like 2009. The difference is iPhone games in 2009 gave you, you know, like enough to do on a bathroom break for $1 or free. DS games were like $30. But, you know, even then, you know, like, okay, that was back in 2005. When you go into 2011 on the 3DS, a lot of these launch titles gave you absolutely jack dick. Like, Bust-A-Move Universe was a joke. Asphalt 3D is just some crappy mobile game racer. Rayman 3D is not a great port of Rayman 2 from, like, the Dreamcast. I think that's the version on 3DS. Combat of Giants. No. And even on the Nintendo side of things, the 3 launch titles Nintendo had were Nintendogs Plus Cats, Pilot Wings Resort, and Steel Diver. None of which are bad games, but there's really nothing to them. Pilot Wings is cool for an afternoon, but that's about it. Steel Diver, there's really nothing to Steel Diver. It's an interesting concept, but like that's all it really has going for it. Oh, a submarine game. Okay. And Nintendogs Plus Cats, like, I have so many great memories of Nintendogs, but playing Nintendogs more recently shows me Nintendogs, you get as much value out of Nintendogs as you want to put in. If you really want to treat that dog like it's your actual damn dog, you'll love Nintendogs. If you look at it objectively as a video game, there's nothing to fucking do in Nintendogs, man. Plus Cats. So at $250, the 3DS was substantially more expensive than the Wii at the time, which I believe the Wii hit like $150. The price point of the 3DS, it was more expensive than something like the Xbox 360, the PS3 in some cases, and when the PlayStation Vita was announced, like the price point of that was also $250. And the Vita obviously like didn't end up working out, but you know, you had the Vita, which was practically a PS3 in your pocket, and you know, it had dual analog sticks and all this nonsense shoved into it. Then you had the 3DS, the dorky little 3DS with a cool glasses-free 3D display and absolutely nothing to do with that damn thing at launch. It didn't even launch with the Nintendo eShop. You couldn't even download anything. Now, the 3DS always had built-in software. You had Face Raiders, you had AR games, and you had Street Pass. But Street Pass, like, for me, like, I never experienced much of Street Pass because I never took my 3DS outside. AR games and Face Raiders are cool, but they're very much kind of like, they're like neat little mini games. There's not an awful lot to them. So I'm talking $250 for the 3DS at launch. I'm putting this as a bad deal. At the time, I think you could kind of like consider warranting it, where it's like, oh, this is a neat thing. But as the months went on, there was just nothing to do with this handheld. The Nintendo eShop launched in June of 2011. This thing launched in March in North America, January or February in Japan. And by the time June hit, they had Ocarina of Time 3D, which is an incredible game, but it's a remake. And just 1 month later, Nintendo announced like, oh shit, we're dropping the price to $170. That's an insane price drop, and that just shows that, like, yeah, this was a massive mistake. So, you know, talking about 3DS at launch, $250, that's a bad deal. Now, by comparison, I would like to talk about the Nintendo 2DS and the Nintendo 2DS in roughly 2016 or so. This is when the 2DS got a price drop to $80. And not only that, but it also included a copy of Mario Kart 7. And this was like a $40 value. So you were practically getting a game system for $40. And listen, I'm not like the biggest fan of the 2DS, like feel-wise, but a lot of people have considered the 2DS to be incredibly comfortable. One of the most comfortable systems ever and all of that. I disagree, but yeah, you know, like who knows? I might just have funny little palms. But yeah, just literally thinking of the concept of owning a 2DS in 2016 for $80, getting Mario Kart 7 just included for free. And in addition, you know, you have DS backwards compatibility. You can play pretty much any DS game that you want on the 2DS, except for Guitar Hero On Tour. Respect. But you have everything on the Nintendo eShop too. Hell, you could download Netflix on the 2DS. It looked like ass, but it's still like you got a Netflix device for $80, portable Netflix. All the eShop exclusive games, DSiWare games, virtual console games. You can play Game Boy games, NES games, Game Boy Color games, Game Gear games. If you want to just fuck around a little bit, I don't know. And the 3DS library is so high quality. There's so many great games that Nintendo put out on the 3DS. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's going as an amazing deal. You know what else is going as an amazing deal? Skyward Sword on the Wii, the Wii Remote Special Edition Bundle. You got a special gold Wii Remote Plus, which is necessary because, hey, you know, this game requires Wii Motion Plus. So if you didn't have Wii Motion Plus or a Wii Remote Plus, what better way to get it than to get this special bundle? And, you know, Skyward Sword was already coming with a special soundtrack CD too. So you got a soundtrack CD and a Wii Remote and the brand new Zelda game for $70. Of course, you know, like Wii Play was $50 and you got a Wii Remote, but this is like the brand new Zelda game, and for $20 extra, you're getting a special edition controller. It's not even just some random white or black Wii Remote they just grabbed off the shelf and threw in the box. No, this is a special edition Wii Remote. And like Skyward Sword was like already a $50 game for only $20 more, and you're getting the soundtrack CD too. Man, I'd put this in amazing deal. You know, it just makes so much sense. I mean, like, hey, you know, let's think about this. I'm not advocating for you to scalp products or any garbage like that. You're a loser if you're doing that. However, you know, this isn't a bad investment, buddy. If you're ever thinking about like, oh, wow, should I buy this $70 Wii Remote bundle for Skyward Sword? Think about in 10 years. That thing is going to retain its value and then some. So not only is it a very functional bundle, it may be more expensive than a standard game, but it has more than enough reason to be. You're getting a controller, you're getting a special edition controller for significantly cheaper than buying just a regular ass Wii Remote on its own. Yeah, I'm putting this in an amazing deal. But of course, if we're going to talk about this, we should talk about Skyward Sword HD on the Nintendo Switch. $60 release, much like pretty much anything Nintendo pumps out on the Switch and onward. Yeah, you know, by comparison to stuff like the other Zelda HD remasters, Twilight Princess was $60 with the Amiibo included, but if you would just buy it standalone on the Nintendo eShop on Wii U, it was only $50. Wind Waker HD, $50 standalone, but $60 for this funny little figure. And Skyward Sword was $60 standalone. And they also released an Amiibo with it, Zelda and the Loft Wing, and that was $25. Amiibo were getting expensive around this time, and it is a very nice Amiibo. Like, I do think Nintendo has definitely upped their quality substantially over the years. However, you know, like, remember when Amiibo were like literally like fucking pennies? $12.99. Now this was twice as expensive, and don't you worry, we're gonna talk about like blossomed to like $50,000. Yeah, they also did special edition Joy-Con for Skyward Sword HD, and those were available separately for $80. So, yeah, you know, a lot of this was kind of frustrating when you look at Nintendo back during the Wii era, where, you know, they were willing to give you that Skyward Sword Wii Remote bundle for a brand new game. You know, this was a brand new release. It wasn't a remake or a remaster or anything like that. And they were willing to cut you a deal there. Whereas with Skyward Sword HD, yeah, that was already more expensive than something like Wind Waker HD or Twilight Princess HD. And I found that Skyward Sword HD definitely didn't really add as much as those other remasters did. Now, that doesn't make it a bad remaster. I think it was a very good remaster. I think Skyward Sword HD was very necessary. I love that they added button controls because, you know, that makes it so then that game can be enjoyed by so many more people and for generations. You know, let's say in 50 years, if Nintendo has a console that for some reason doesn't have motion control, they can re-release Skyward Sword, and I think that's important. At the same time, you look at Twilight Princess HD, and they had to go into that game, and they had to do a lot of substantial graphical work to get that game to look better in HD. And unfortunately, Twilight Princess just doesn't age as well, and that's just a matter of fact because of its art style. You know, it's much more realistic and a lot darker, so you know, it doesn't immediately age as well as something like Wind Waker. But you look at like all the additions they made to both of those games, content wise, they fixed up a bunch of stuff, they looked a lot better, and Skyward Sword HD, a lot of the enhancements they made to this game, they weren't as like noticeable. A lot of it was kind of just down to like, oh, it's slightly faster paced. They removed a couple of dialogue boxes so then, you know, you can get to the action quicker. They didn't add any substantial content or anything like that, but a lot of the enhancements were genuinely like really substantial at the end of the day. 60 frames per second, and they added the ability to control the camera. That's huge. But visually, while Skyward Sword HD looks better than the Wii release, it doesn't look substantially better. It doesn't look like, oh my god, whoa! And I do think it's lame that the $25 Amiibo has a pretty decent feature involved where you can just immediately call your loft wing and you can immediately just go to the sky anywhere when you're on the ground. Now, to be fair, this wasn't like a massive issue with the original. You pretty much always have to go up to like these bird statues to go up to the sky. And there were enough bird statues laying around. It's not like a huge quality of life improvement, but just the fact that this is one of the few legitimate quality of life improvements that, you know, is a lot more like tangible, I guess. You know, like a lot of the quality of life improvements in Skyward Sword HD kind of feel more like mods to make the game run better and be a little better, rather than like, oh, here's an actual addition to the game. This is more so an actual addition, and it's locked behind a goddamn Amiibo. But again, a lot of this comes down to, is there value to this game existing? And yes, like I think Skyward Sword HD really makes Skyward Sword make a lot more sense at the end of the day. Like, Skyward Sword's always been a good game, but definitely been a little more controversial, and it made a lot more controversial design decisions that some people just don't really gel with. You know, how linear it is and the motion controls. You know, I think the HD remake makes a lot of that much more palatable. At the same time, like a $60 game, I just don't see it, buddy. I'm sorry. I'm putting this in meh deal. I don't think it's like egregious or anything, but I'm also just kind of going like, come on, man. All right, now I kind of want to talk about where Amiibo was back in 2014 when the figure line launched. They cost $12.99 a pop, which even at the time, like, that was almost seen as like, oh, they're a little more expensive than like Skylanders. But you know, I mean, like, looking back at that now, like, it's just like, that's a perfectly reasonable price. $13 for pretty decent little Nintendo figures. And a lot of the time, like, these figures were of characters that you just don't see a ton of merchandise for. And, you know, most of that's because of Smash Brothers being the main lineup for Amiibo. But, you know, I mean, like, getting, like, the figure of Wii Fit Trainer or, you know, Marth or Captain Falcon or something, you know, it's cool, you know? Like, oh, man, and $13, and a lot of these were available in, like, very common retailers. And in terms of, like, support in games, like, these figures were pretty well supported in Nintendo games at the time. Nearly every major Nintendo release supported Amiibo in some way. Now, of course, the support would vary in terms of usefulness, but it, of course, kind of felt like each Amiibo release had a dedicated game that it was associated with, and they made sure that it's just like, hey, you know, if we're releasing an Amiibo, we have a game that's tied right to it. Like you can see with a lot of the figures at the time, when you go to the back, they almost always have a specific game that they are advertising the use of the Amiibo in. So, you know, the Pikmin Amiibo was primarily released for Hey Pikmin on the 3DS. So they advertised that. Now, in contrast, nowadays, I find that Amiibo figures are kind of just released when Nintendo wants to sell a figurine. Hell, even just mentioning the back of the box, you look at any new Amiibo box, and they don't have anything on the back. They all have the exact same back. They never talk about what game this Amiibo is meant to release with, because frankly, Amiibo these days, they're kind of just meant to be collectibles. I mean, like with the Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 collection, you know, they had Amiibo release months later, like in April of 2026. And like having Mario Galaxy themed Amiibo is really cool, but it also is like, what do they do in the Mario Galaxy games? They give you like a one-up. It's pretty lame. Now, to be fair, I think Nintendo kind of thought things through and was like, okay, most people are just kind of buying Amiibo because they want the figure and they don't really care about in-game functionality. So when it comes to stuff like that, they're just gonna be like, all right, we're just gonna give you like a power-up. We'll give you something, but like don't get your hopes up. It's like with Donkey Kong Bonanza, the figurine released with that barely does anything. It gives you the Pauline's Diva outfit. That's about it, but it's like, I don't know, man. But the price points of all modern Amiibo is absurd. So the Donkey Kong and Pauline amiibo for Bonanza was $30. And I'll give Nintendo some credit. These newer amiibo are often way more detailed and way larger than, a lot of the 2014, 15, 16 amiibo. Like the Mario Galaxy amiibo are very large. And then you also have the Kirby Air Riders amiibo that have the cool functionality like being able to swap the riders. But those amiibo are $50. So yeah, they still do some cool things with amiibo, and some of the amiibo are generally really well done sculpts, and the detail is great, the size is nice, it's all cool. But yeah, the in-game support is pretty much non-existent in most of these games. Like, these amiibo barely do anything anymore, and the price points have skyrocketed like mad. So I would say, back in the day, you know what? I would honestly say amiibo at $13 a pop, that was a good deal. Definitely a little more expensive than Skylanders. I believe Skylanders were about like $10 a pop. But to be honest, the Skylanders quality never really spoke to me. Like, I was never like, oh wow, look at how great these toys feel. Like, these are so high quality. They weren't bad or anything, but I never got into Skylanders, so I don't think I was ever really swooned over by those toys. But amiibo were generally of decent quality. The first couple that came out, you had some funny nonsense like piss stand Link, but eventually I think Nintendo kind of figured out some of those quality concerns, and generally made like pretty damn high quality figures from there on out for a pretty affordable price. And the fact that they would work across multiple games, and some games had really great amiibo support, something like Mario Maker or Yoshi's Woolly World. Smash Brothers, like that was kind of the baseline amiibo game, and amiibo and Smash Brothers were cool. You could definitely have a fun time training up your amiibo in that game, and kind of the fun little extras you'd get throughout. I would say amiibo, having a couple of cool $13 a pop amiibo, that was kind of cool. Modern amiibo, listen, man, I might be a little harsh here. I'm gonna put them in the bad deal territory. It's mainly like, when I was picking up Donkey Kong Bonanza, I saw like all the Donkey Kong and Pauline amiibo, and I considered it because I'm like, oh, I think this game is gonna be really cool, and the amiibo is kind of neat. But then I thought, it's just like, okay, this is genuinely gonna give me like nothing. And I think the outfit that it gives you can unlock in the game without the amiibo. So it's just like, okay, I like that they give you that option, but it just kind of makes me go, it's just like, okay, so why would I spend $30 on a Toys to Life figure? A nice looking one, but still, like, it's not like these are so abnormally nice at this point. Like, the quality has definitely gone up, and the attention to detail has definitely gone up. But overall, I wouldn't even say, like, modern amiibo are like, oh my god, so high quality. Like, they're still toys. And when you start spending $30 to $50 on these amiibo, I just feel like, if you spend, like, a little bit more, you can actually get, like, a much higher quality figurine without in-game support. But when the in-game support is so lackluster to begin with, who the hell cares? All right, it isn't a Scott Stash video without me bitching about Mario All-Stars 25th Anniversary Edition on the Wii. I'll keep this quick. For $30 in 2010, you got the Super Nintendo ROM Super Mario All-Stars on a Wii disc, with no changes. It's literally just the Super Nintendo game. And then the collectibles included were just pretty lackluster. You got like a history book that didn't really show anything that interesting. I mean, it's kind of cool to flip through, but like, And then a soundtrack CD, which is cute, I guess, but it has like one track from 10 Mario games, and then 10 individual 1-second sound effects from Mario 1. Okay. Now, I'm gonna be honest, like, there is a part of me that really loves this box set just because it looks so nice, and, I always wanted it as a kid, and by the time I actually had the money for it, like, it was already off of store shelves. It was a limited edition item. So when I finally got it, like, it was almost like this incredible little, oh, finally moment when I could actually go through that history book, and then I finished it in like 30 seconds, and I was like, okay, cool. I would honestly put this kind of in that Donkey Kong Country Returns HD tier, where it's like, I do like that game, but it's kind of hard to defend it. This is a cute little celebration package, but I'm kind of going between meh and bad. bad deal. It's 30 bucks, you know, like it was a cheaper product, but like again, it's a fucking Super Nintendo game and they didn't do anything to it. Now, you might be saying, well, Scott, the $30 is mostly for the special edition goodies included. To that I say that is a shitty little booklet and a shitty little soundtrack CD. However, I understand what you're saying, and I'm about to prove you wrong because also on this list, I'm going to talk about the Nintendo Selects re-release of Super Mario All-Stars on the Wii. Now, I do like the fact that this happened because I believe this came out in like 2016. You know, Nintendo hadn't done Nintendo Selects for a bit of time there. And, you know, they finally brought it back and they had, you know, a bunch of Wii U and 3DS games for 20 bucks a pop with that god-awful Nintendo Selects branding, but damn it, 20 bucks a pop. I'll take it. But they also did some Wii games, which was cool. And one of the games they did was Super Mario All-Stars. So you could get Super Mario All-Stars for 20 bucks. But it was just the game. Okay, so $20 for just a Super Nintendo game. This doesn't include any of the stuff that makes me actually like the 25th anniversary limited edition version. Buddy, I think we have our very first complete ripoff. $20 for the Super Nintendo ROM on a Wii disc. Okay, boom. For the original 25th anniversary edition, I mean, it was 30 bucks and you get some cool stuff. I think I'd still put it in bad deal. I'm sorry. I still like it, but might as well talk about Mario 3D All-Stars because this, similarly to Galaxy 1 and 2 on Switch, got a lot of flack, and I've already talked about this one a lot too. So we'll keep this brief. I think it's a meh deal. You know, I mean, hey, when you compare it to Galaxy 1 and 2 at $70, this at $60 is a goddamn steal. But I remember in 2020, there were like rumors going around about like, oh man, what is Nintendo gonna do for Mario's 35th anniversary? And there were like leaks and rumors about like, oh, well, Nintendo's gonna put like literally every Mario game basically ever made on Switch or something like that. So when 3D All-Stars actually got like fully announced and we saw it and everything, it was very underwhelming because they really didn't have a ton of like extra little bonuses in here. And obviously at the time you're missing Galaxy 2 and, you know, 3D Land, 64 DS, you know, that would have made this feel very, you know, complete. But maybe Nintendo was playing the long game and was like, no, we're going to save Galaxy 2 for a 2025 release. But overall, like looking back at everything, I don't think this is that bad of a deal. Is this a perfect collection? God, no. There's so many things I would have loved to see 3D All-Stars do. I would have loved if there was more like bonus material or more like interesting additions, maybe like some extra added content, like cool added mission mode, or I don't know, just something to kind of make things a little more like fresh and new instead of just here's 3 3D Mario games. But I don't think it's that bad. It's just kind of like, it's easy to complain about, and I think you should complain about it, but I would put it in meh deal. Like, it's just like, eh, it is what it is. I mean, you know, you can definitely, like, scrutinize the value of it all, but, you know, you get 3 of the best 3D platformers of all time for 60 bucks, and there's, like, some enhancements and stuff, and you know, it has like a cute little menu system, even though I don't think it looks like incredible or anything, but it's like, I give it a meh. Now, in 2012, there was Kirby's Dream Collection on the Wii, which released for $40. And this is almost kind of like a gold standard for Nintendo compilations, like what all Nintendo compilations should strive to be. So for 40 bucks, you get a fair amount of Kirby games. Now, I think what kind of makes this a little weird is the fact that most of these games were already available on Wii. You could already play Kirby's Adventure, Superstar, Dreamland 3, and Kirby 64 via the Wii Shop channel. Now, you know, it was cool to have 2 Game Boy games here. You know, they had Kirby's Dreamland and Dreamland 2. Personally speaking, I think it would have been cool to see some other games, you know, games from systems that you know, might have been a little like cooler to see them get re-released on the Wii. Like, I think this would have been a very interesting opportunity to bring back Kirby Tilt and Tumble from the Game Boy Color, since that used like a motion control sensor, and you know, you could map that to the Wii remote. That would have been really neat. But it's whatever. They pretty much just wanted to do like the first 6 main Kirby games. And, you know, Game Boy games weren't really, like, officially available on Wii for the most part, so, you know, was cool to see those available. But all the other games like were already on Wii, so you know it's neat to have them on a disc. But you know it wasn't the most like impactful lineup of games. Still good games, but you know they could have included some interesting extra titles here and there. But the Kirby Game Boy games were also available on the 3DS eShop at the time. This was 2012, so the 3DS was already kicking at the time. I believe Game Boy games were about $4 a pop. At the time, so you know those two Game Boy games, that was $8. Kirby's Adventure on the NES games were $5 on the Wii Shop channel. Super Nintendo games were $8, and then N64 games were $10. So when you add everything together, it pretty much costs $40. I guess it's like $39 overall, but you know, include some tax there, and yeah, they pretty much give you like the exact value of all of these games from the Wii Shop channel, but then they just add a bunch of other stuff. There's so much stuff in this collection. You got brand new challenge stages based off of Kirby's Return to Dreamland. Like this is brand new content. They run on the Return to Dreamland engine, but this is brand new stuff. Then you got this incredibly charming timeline where you can go through the entirety of Kirby history. They mention Obama, and they just have all these extra little things you can do. Like you can, you know, rotate the game boxes around and just take a look at all of those. And, you know, you can actually watch a couple episodes from the Kirby Right Back at Ya anime. Yeah, man, I mean, this is just cool. Now, the game lineup definitely does equate the value that they were selling this at, but they just have a bunch of extra little flourishes that you didn't get any of this with Super Mario All-Stars on the Wii. You didn't get barely any of this with Super Mario 3D All-Stars. The most that game had was like a soundtrack player, and I'm just like, who the hell cares about that, man? Like, it's just like, that's such nothing content. Like, they definitely just add that because it's like easy to label that as like, oh, a little bonus feature, but it's like, who's gonna boot up this game to just listen to the game's soundtrack? Like, just go on fucking YouTube. I would put Kirby's Dream Collection in the good deal territory. I think it's a good deal. I don't think it's like crazy value. Like, I think it'll be a crazy value if they included a couple of extra games, but as it stands, I think it's a good deal. But what Nintendo compilation is an amazing deal? I would put that as a Metroid Prime Trilogy. Trilogy includes all three of the Metroid Prime games at the time, and the first two games were re-released separately for like $30 a pop in Japan. Just having those two just included here alongside Metroid Prime 3, which was a $50 game at the time. So you just combine all of this and it should be like over $100 worth of stuff. And it was $50. You get all three games, you get some bonuses thrown in there, especially if you get the Steelbook edition. That came with like an art book and all of that. This is one of the craziest deals that Nintendo's ever put out. Which makes it interesting to talk about Metroid Prime Remastered. I remember there was such a big rumor around like 2018 that Metroid Prime Trilogy was coming to Nintendo Switch, and you know the way I envisioned it was like kind of just like an up-resed version of this Wii game, pretty much. But it did take a couple more years to get anything. But in 2023, we got Metroid Prime Remastered, and they just dropped it randomly on the Switch eShop for $40. So for $40, we got a full-blown remaster. In some ways, it almost feels like a remake. And yeah, because of that, I think Metroid Prime Remastered definitely fits the bill for a good deal. You know, I think it would have been cool if it was like all three games fully remade or remastered. But at the same time, you know, I think the fact that they focused solely on Metroid Prime 1 definitely helped them make this remaster as good as it could possibly be. So I'd put the remaster as a good deal, which doesn't say anything about like, oh yeah, well Metroid Prime Trilogy is the best way to play it, or Metroid Prime Remastered isn't as good of a deal. Like, they are both fantastic. I think these are both fantastic ways to play Metroid Prime. I would probably recommend doing Metroid Prime Remastered first, but Metroid Prime Trilogy is still like undeniably a great deal, especially if you remember on the Wii U eShop, that thing was like $10-20. Oh my god, it's so cool. Let's talk about some bullshit that isn't cool. Animal Crossing City Folk Wii Speak bundle. This is $70. Why? They were willing to cut us a deal on Skyward Sword. For some reason, they didn't want to do that on City Folk and the Wii Speak. This is literally the price of buying both of these things separately. And Animal Crossing City Folk at $50 was already kind of weird because, you know, it didn't really feel like they did a ton new with City Folk. There was new stuff with City Folk. It definitely kind of felt like it was Wild World on the DS, but with leg room. You know, it's just less limitations. Definitely running and looking a lot better. But yeah, I just think it's kind of weird that, you know, like something like Mario Kart Wii, you know, that included the Wii wheel for free. You know, it was $50 with the Wii wheel. Who cares? Same thing I said about Skyward Sword. Animal Crossing City Folk and the Wii Speak, they didn't want to cut you a deal at all. And that game's value was already kind of up for debate. The Wii Speak's value, where is it? You know, I'm going to put this in meh deal just because it is the price of both of those things combined. So it is kind of like, But yeah, just kind of confusing when you compare it to what they did, you know, like with other games. You know, that game, they were like, we're not willing to cut you a deal on this. So, yeah, it's a meh deal. I think that's just the big problem with a lot of these prices, man. A lot of times Nintendo's prices are so consistent, they are inconsistently consistent. You know, the fact that they just started pricing all of their remakes, remasters, whatever, doesn't matter, at like $60, same price as like their, you know, regular games. So you had stuff like Luigi's Mansion 2 HD at the exact same price as Luigi's Mansion 3. All right, let's talk about this. It was a bad deal. Luigi's Mansion 2 is not a bad game, but it is definitely not the best Luigi's Mansion game. It's like an okay game overall, but you know, I think a lot of its flaws come down to they wanted to make sure this game was a lot more fleshed out than the original. Luigi's Mansion 1 is an incredibly short game, and it has wonderful atmosphere, but I feel like Luigi's Mansion 2 makes better use of Luigi's Poltergust as like an actual mechanic compared to Luigi's Mansion 1, where it just kind of feels like, oh, suck up ghosts whenever you can. Like, you know, like it's just like, well, that's your attack in this game, and that's about as far as it went. Where, you know, in Luigi's Mansion 2, you're solving a lot more intricate puzzles with it. So I think that's interesting, and you know, they definitely kind of tried to stretch the game out for a lot longer, so then it's like a really fully fleshed out adventure game. You know, it lasts like 10 hours or so. It gets kind of boring sometimes. It gets very tedious because like they have this mission structure where you're just kind of going through the same environments over and over, a little bit of backtracking and kind of just doing a lot of the same stuff, and it just like, it's just not very well paced. But it's still like a pretty decent game. The Nintendo Switch release is stupid. $60. I mean, like, it's in HD. It looks nice, I guess. Like, it's Luigi's Mansion 2, and it's running at a higher resolution. Like, certain things have definitely been upgraded a bit, but overall, like, it is not the most like visually stunning remaster. It is kind of just like bringing the game up to speed to be on an HD system. And that's kind of it. Weirdly enough, I think the 3DS game had a very inconsistent frame rate, but it could reach up to 60 frames per second, but it very rarely was at that level. The Switch one, they just cap it at 30, which is interesting because I understand why they did that, but at the same time, it's kind of funny that the 3DS game sometimes runs at 60, and the Switch one never does that, but at the same time, the Switch remaster at least runs incredibly stably. So definitely kind of a Donkey Kong Country Returns HD situation here, where it is literally just it's that old game in HD. That's kind of it. I think it's cool that they brought back the online multiplayer. You know, I think that's cool that they went that far. So, you know, I'll take that. But yeah, it's a bad deal. Just get Luigi's Mansion 3 if you want a Luigi's Mansion on Switch. And Luigi's Mansion 2 HD is kind of like an emergencies only if you're just dying for more Luigi's Mansion on your Switch. All right, fellas. Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour. Let's talk about this. This has consistently been one of the big points of contention with the Switch 2. Is just how Welcome Tour should have been a pack-in title, but they got so greedy that they released it on its own for $10. I will at least say Welcome Tour isn't bad. It's just kind of lame. There's some interesting, cool stuff in Welcome Tour. I would not recommend it to most people, though. And I think that's almost why Nintendo didn't really make it a pack-in title. I think it should have been a pack-in title, but I also kind of understand it not being it because it feels like this is made for, like, fucking nerds, man. Hence, why I'm kind of defending it. My thing is, I don't think it's a great, like, system showcase. It's better at, like, a hardware deep dive, you know, just showing you, like, this is what makes the Nintendo Switch 2 hardware cool. And just trying to give you a better understanding of like how everything within the system operates and giving you like tech demos and just looks at things like if you're a dork for like just talking about Nintendo and all that junk, like it's kind of neat. But yeah, I mean, like if it was a pack-in, I think a lot of people would like start up and they're like, what the fuck is this? So because of that, I do think Welcome Tour is a very niche product, which is probably why they decided to offer it for $10 standalone. And that doesn't mean I think $10 is a great value for it. I do think Welcome Tour is so kind of dry with how it does things and how it presents things, and it is very hard for it to beat the allegations of it being an interactive instruction manual, because that's kind of what it is. It's a little more than that, but it's also like, you do have a lot of like little things to do in there, but so much of the time I spent in Welcome Tour is just bogged down with going up to all these different bits and bobs of these giant controllers and parts of the Switch 2, and just getting shit stamped, and then just like walking up and taking quizzes on stuff, and it's like some of them are kind of cute, but a lot of them are just kind of like, this is kind of a waste of time. And I think they could have done a bit more of an interesting thing with this. There are interesting elements, but I think they could have gone a little further with, you know, the presentation with Welcome Tour. Overall, I wouldn't say I'm like offended at Welcome Tour being $10. I'm more so offended by the fact that, like, I don't know, it could have been better. I think there's $10 worth of content there, you know, but the problem is the content itself is kind of lame. So I would put it in the meh category. I wouldn't say it's a bad deal. I don't think it's like a complete rip-off or anything. I think if you are the target demographic for this game, you'll think it's kind of cool. Everybody else, yeah, it's I would put it in complete rip-off territory for everybody else, but for the right person, I think it's a meh deal. Now, Drag and Drive, this one's kind of tricky. So for 20 bucks, this one is a bit more like laser focused on being a certain game. It is a sports game where you are totally not using a wheelchair. For some reason, Nintendo really does not want anybody referring to what they're doing in Drag and Drive as wheelchair basketball. I don't know. You look at the credits for Drag and Drive, and yeah, you know, like it was made by a very small team. This obviously didn't take like a ton of development resources away from other endeavors. When you look at Drag and Drive, the immediate thought is like, oh, this is like ARMS, but for the Switch 2. And, you know, I think that's kind of fair, but also not at the same time. Because ARMS, while it did have its own problems with kind of a lack of content, at least at launch, I think ARMS was trying to actually be like a legitimate video game. Drag and Drive, I don't think it really gives a shit. They came up with a cute idea on how to use the Joy-Con in kind of a unique way to create a unique video game experience, but they didn't really want to go further than that. I don't think they had a ton of faith in this game as like anything more than just like a cute little like distraction for an hour, and then that was it. Which is why like I do respect that this was a $20 eShop game, because the way they initially showcased it at the Switch 2 Direct was almost in the sense of like I don't know, like part of me thought like this could be just a full-blown retail release. Like $60, $70 full retail release. So when it was revealed that it was a $20 eShop exclusive, I was like, okay, like I can't get that upset at this. And I think the concept is kind of fun and cute. But yeah, that's kind of all it has, is like the concept. It works okay, but it's like, that's all it is, you know? Like, it's just, I think Welcome Tour has a little more to it, where it's just like there's more to kind of do with it and there's more to go back to with it. Drag and Drive is just so like one and done. You try it once and then that's it. And you can say the same about Welcome Tour, but at the very least, like a lot of the little mini games and tech demos they have, like they at least kind of incentivize you to just strive for the high score. And there is kind of like a fun element to that. Drag and Drive, it's kind of cool to see your Joy-Con being used in a unique way. And that's about it. I would put it in Luigi's Mansion 2 HD territory. All these prices are bothering me so much, I had to change shirts. The Nintendo Switch 1's Pro Controller. This thing retailed for $70, and I always found that to be a bit high. Another thing is, that's around the same price as the PS5's DualSense controller. But when the Nintendo Switch 1's Pro Controller was initially released, I mean, we were already like 3 years away from the DualSense controller, and we were still using the PS4 controller. So at the time, this was the most expensive, like, traditional controller on the market. Now, you know, you could make the argument that it's just like, oh, well, it's advertised as a professional controller. You know, you look at like the Xbox One's Elite controller or something, and that's an absurd price. But like, this is not in the same league as the Xbox One's Elite controller. The Elite controller is 100% more of like, this is for enthusiasts only. Nintendo's just always branded this kind of stuff as pro controllers when they aren't really for professionals. They're more so just, this is a standard ass gamepad. Because the Nintendo Switch 1 Pro controller just doesn't really offer anything that's like an actual like, oh, the professionals must like this. If anything, it has something that professionals hate, and it's the fact that the D-pad on the Switch 1 Pro controller is infamously not very good, especially by Nintendo standards, because Nintendo invented the D-pad, or, you know, they sort of did, you know, like, it's not like they fully invented it, but they popularized it for years there. Like, when you compare other controllers to Nintendo controllers, you could almost always depend on Nintendo's D-pads. And the Pro Controller for Nintendo Switch was like one of the first times where it's just like, wow, Nintendo made a shitty-ass D-pad. Now, here's my thing. I think that's like one of the only major problems with the Nintendo Switch 1 Pro Controller, because other than that, I mean, like, I loved this controller. I always found this controller to be absolutely lovely to use. But for $70, the only major thing that I think this has a leg up on compared to something like, let's say, the PS4 controller at the time, which was cheaper, was the battery life. The battery life of the Switch 1 Pro controller is phenomenal. Other than that, I mean, yeah, you have motion controls in this controller, but so did the PS4 controller. You have an NFC reader on this thing, but the PS4 controller had a touchpad. The PS4 controller had a light bar, you know, it just like, I don't know, man. This controller was definitely pretty overpriced, but hey, I mean, all controllers started to go up in price significantly around this time. I think it's crazy how expensive the Xbox controller is compared to all these other controllers, which have a bunch more stuff in it. You know, the Xbox controller didn't have motion controls or anything like that. It's been like a pretty traditional controller, but price point is pretty comparable to like the PlayStation and Nintendo controllers. But either way, I do think the Switch 1 Pro controller was always overpriced. However, I do think it's worth it for all Switch owners to get. Of course, it depends on if you're going to be playing in TV mode. If you're going to be playing in TV mode, yes, I think you almost need a Pro controller. Now, you don't need it. I mean, you can just take off the Joy-Con from the system and just play like that. But I think having the Pro controller is just so nice and convenient, and it just feels so much better, to the point where I would probably put it in the meh deal category, where I don't like the price, but I think the product is good enough to warrant shelling that out. As annoying as it may be. Now, by comparison, we have the Nintendo Switch 2 Pro Controller. I didn't think they could make the Switch 1 Pro Controller much better, outside of maybe the D-pad. It shocked me. This controller is absolutely incredible. It feels phenomenal. It's genuinely one of the best controllers I've ever used, and it looks nearly identical to the Switch 1 Pro controller, but they made it feel so much better. The sticks have such a soft feel to them when you hit them against the side. Like, it feels like butter. This whole controller feels incredible. it's $90. Now, they do add a couple of things like a headphone jack. They do add GL and GR buttons on the back, much like a lot of the more, professional controllers have, the back buttons that you can assign other buttons to. Then, you can more comfortably access certain buttons without, moving your thumbs around too much. For example, in Breath of the Wild, I think I added the run button to one of the grip buttons. And, that just made things a little more comfortable, a little easier sometimes. But overall, I mean, the additions they made to this controller were not substantial enough at all to warrant a $20 price increase. Yes, the quality is way better, but it's not like the Switch 1 Pro controller was of a poor quality. So I think this is pretty nuts because I love this controller to death. I think it's phenomenal, but I would have a very hard time actually recommending it to anybody. I think you can definitely make do with a Switch 1 Pro controller, just using that with your Switch 2. There's absolutely nothing this controller does that I think warrants that kind of price point. That price point is pretty absurd, I'm gonna be honest. So it's a little strange to be putting a product that I absolutely love in the bad deal category, but the price is just outrageous on this thing. So amazing controller, dog shit price. Let's circle back around to some more DLC here. I want to talk about Mario Kart 8 on Wii U's DLC, because for 2 packs of DLC, you got the first wave of DLC that focused on The Legend of Zelda, and you got 2 new cups with 8 new tracks, 3 new characters, and some extra kart parts and all of that. And similarly, you got wave 2 that focused on Animal Crossing, and you got the similar batch of content, 2 new cups, 8 new tracks, 3 new characters, some carts. Now, both packs by themselves were $8. $8 a pack. If you bought both of them in a bundle, it cost $12 for 16 tracks, which at the time, Mario Kart 8 launched with 32 tracks. So this was practically half the content of the base game being offered to us for $12. And if you bought the bundle, you got different colors for Yoshi and Shy Guy. I think this is like one of Nintendo's greatest deals of all time. Like this was incredible. Like $12 for this was an absolute no-brainer. Some of Mario Kart 8's best tracks are in this DLC. And of course, like the character selection, it's okay. I think they kind of lean a little too much into like clone characters because you get like Tanuki Mario, Cat Peach, and Dry Bowser. I like Dry Bowser, but Tanuki Mario and Cat Peach, they have some fun animations and stuff. It doesn't feel like just a complete palette swap or whatever, but for the most part, I'm kind of like, I would have preferred like an actually new character. But you got Link, and you got the villager, and you got Isabelle, and that's all really cool. I think this is one of Nintendo's best deals. I would put this in the amazing deal category because it is literally $12. $12 for this is incredible. Now, I want to compare this to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's Booster Course Pass because this was $25. However, we got 48 new courses. Now, that was the initial promise, but eventually as time went on, they started introducing characters, and we got a lot of characters with this DLC update. They eventually added 8 characters to the game, and a lot of these were like very heavily requested characters. You had Funky Kong, Diddy Kong, you had Kamek finally making an appearance in a main Mario Kart game outside of Mario Kart Tour, which just kind of felt like this was like, oh man, everything's coming together, because Kamek was originally meant to appear in Mario Kart 64. Like, there's beta screenshots of that, and it never happened. And, they finally brought him into the game. Wiggler was cool to come back. Petey Piranha. Like, all this stuff was, like, really, really cool. And they eventually added, like, a bunch of, like, Mii costumes, too. But I think the biggest problem with the Booster Course Pass is I think the track quality was definitely a lot less consistent compared to Mario Kart 8's initial DLC. That's because the Booster Course Pass was pretty much entirely based off of assets from Mario Kart Tour, the mobile game. And, they'd pretty some stuff up, and they'd use, like, Mario Kart 8 assets and stuff. But you take a look at something like Toad Circuit in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's Booster Course Pass, and it looks pretty barren. It does not look like it belongs in the same game as all of these other, like, beautiful Mario Kart 8 tracks. Of course, like, the Booster Course Pass hit this game like years after Mario Kart 8 launched. So there is kind of like a hard line in the sand between like what's a Booster Course Pass course and what's a regular Mario Kart 8 course. Like the art styles are different. Even design philosophies are different. Mario Kart 8 had such a big focus on like anti-gravity, and basically none of the booster course pass courses focus on anti-gravity. There's like certain tracks like Sky High Sunday where you're always in anti-grav mode, but normal Mario Kart 8 tracks are kind of like, oh, you swap into anti-gravity mode, and the track then goes all over the place, and nothing really does that in the booster course pass. So the quality is definitely a little more questionable. However, overall, I think even the worst Mario Kart 8 Deluxe track in the booster course pass is normally better than most racing games' best tracks. Mario Kart is Mario Kart. Even if a track is a little lame, you're still playing Mario Kart, and there's still like a certain level of quality it reaches where it's just like you're still having fun. There's not really a track in the booster course pass where I'm like, oh my god, this one fucking sucks and I don't want to be here at all right now. Like, it's more so like, I don't really care. I'm playing Mario Kart. I'm having a good time. Yeah, I may not like this track that much compared to this track or something, but at the end of the day, like, does any of this... I'm still playing Mario Kart, and this was new content in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe after we've been waiting for years for a new Mario Kart game. I think the value of this was incredible, and in addition to the fact that if you had Nintendo Switch Online plus expansion pack, you just got the booster course pass included for free. Like, it was just there as a part of your membership. So yeah, I think I'm putting this as an amazing deal. Might as well talk about Nintendo Switch Online at this point, because Switch Online has always kind of been like a contentious subject, because when it was first initially revealed, I mean, this thing was absolutely just mocked, because here's the thing, Nintendo never charged for online before Switch Online. And for the first like year and a half of Nintendo Switch, Nintendo didn't charge for the online membership. They were just like, yeah, it's free for a bit until we're gonna charge for it eventually. And then one day in like September 2018, they pretty much flipped the switch and they made it so then like, all right, boom, you're paying for Switch Online now. And you didn't see any difference in quality. It was the same crap, and like Nintendo's Online has just never been ideal. You still had to use friend codes, and the only thing they pretty much introduced here was, oh, you have a selection of NES games to play on Switch Online for $20 a year. And that was it. It was just NES games, and it was just a handful of them, and they were adding like 3 new NES games a month for a bit there, and that was pretty much it. So I think at launch, I would have considered this to be a bad deal. Launch Nintendo Switch Online was a bad deal, because you were getting the same quality online multiplayer that you got for free, which wasn't that great, but hey, at least it was free. But now you have to pay $20 a year for it. Now, $20 a year, it isn't anything crazy, at least to me. Of course, everybody's different, but I thought $20 was a fairly low asking price. My problem comes in with the fact that, I don't know, for some reason Nintendo is like, let's combine the classic games with the online multiplayer subscription. And I just felt like, okay, you have like 2 things that just don't really clash very well here. Who's going to want to pay for a $20 Nintendo Switch Online subscription? The younger guys playing Splatoon and everything. And then what are you going to include as a bonus with the $20 subscription? A way to play fucking Balloon Fight online. Now, as the years have gone on, I think Nintendo Switch Online has kind of validated its existence, and it does offer quite a bit. Now, I do think the online multiplayer is still not, like, perfect with Nintendo, but it's definitely improved over the years. And what I do really appreciate is that more and more and more Nintendo games offer online multiplayer. Even just Mario Party games having online multiplayer as a standard is a huge step in the right direction. Like, it's just online multiplayer is no longer necessarily like, oh, will this game have online multiplayer? The only game that I can think of in recent memory where it was kind of weird about it was Super Mario Bros. Wonder. But for the most part, like, most games that you'd expect online multiplayer have online multiplayer now, which I really do appreciate. And the classic game selection is honestly pretty damn good. I mean, you got NES, SNES, and Game Boy a part of the $20 a year tier. And I think that has a great selection and just like a very large amount of games to kind of chew on there. For $20, I mean, you know, like a lot of these games separately, back on like the Wii U and Wii and whatnot, like NES games were $5 a pop, SNES games were $8, Game Boy games on the 3DS, they were like $3 to $4 a piece. And the amount of games on offer and the amount of good quality games on offer, and you know, for kind of a creepy little gremlin like me, I do like weird games being offered, or like games that actually use like unique accessories. Like, you know, they just started to add like Mario Paint, where, yeah, on Switch 2, you can use the Joy-Con mouse, but you can also just straight up plug in a USB mouse, which is cool. Or even just like Kirby Tilt and Tumble, being able to use like the gyroscope to play that game. I think that's neat. And just the fact that Nintendo's kind of gone out of their way to get different titles for this that may be a little harder for them to get. You know, they're working directly with Xbox, and, you know, you have a lot of Rare's old games on the NES and SNES and whatnot. I don't know. I think it's kind of cool. Now, they do offer certain things like Nintendo Music, which is neat, but I think that's such a weird thing to offer as a part of your Nintendo Switch online membership. Here's a smartphone app where you listen to music from Nintendo games. Like, I'm like, I don't know, it's just kind of weird. And then the special offers, you know, like, you don't really get anything for free. It's literally just, oh, you have access to buy more shit. Cloud saves, I think that's important. Kind of annoying that that's stuck behind a paywall, but it's also like, whatever. Overall, I mean, like, I kind of look at this from the classic game selection. I think if you don't care about the classic games, then the online membership is kind of like, you know, like, But overall, I would be pretty content calling Nintendo Switch Online at $20 a year to be a good deal. You get a lot for that if you're interested in a lot of Nintendo's legacy software, and you get some extra little bonuses, but some of the bonuses are a little lame. This is kind of like, okay, like, how many people are actually using Nintendo Music? How many people are actually taking advantage of these special offers? Yeah, you do get stuff like, let's say, Tetris 99 and whatnot, but Tetris 99 is a free game that is completely online dependent, pretty much. So that is something where it's like they like to call it like a Nintendo Switch Online member exclusive, but it's also something where it's like, well, yeah, because it's an online focused game, so you're gonna need the online membership regardless. Now let's talk expansion pack. So the expansion pack pretty much just gets you a bunch of extra stuff, specifically more premium classic systems. On Switch 2, you get GameCube. You know, across everything, you get N64, Game Boy Advance, Sega Genesis, which I always found to be kind of like a little goofy. Like, I like that it's there, and I think the games available on Sega Genesis are really cool. They have a lot of cool third-party games, a lot of interesting stuff like Mega Man: The Wily Wars. That was like a Sega Channel exclusive from back in the day. But I just found that inclusion to be odd, considering Sega's already re-released a bunch of the games on the Sega Genesis Nintendo Switch Online elsewhere on the system. Like, there was already this Sega Genesis collection that you could get, which oddly enough, they did delist that. So, I guess the Sega Genesis Switch Online is the only way to get this stuff. So, whatever. To be fair, I think that Sega Genesis collection had pretty bad emulation. Like, it was okay, but there was a lot of like input lag and everything. And the Switch Online app actually has like really good emulation, so it has some value. And Game Boy Advance, N64, those are great. N64 emulation was always a bit spotty, and it's still a little spotty, but I think it's overall pretty decent. GameCube is big. The fact that they didn't raise the price with the introduction of GameCube, I think that's a huge deal. That's like, wow. And like at $50 a year, like, they do have to offer a lot, but I do think they do offer just enough. But I think you have to be a very specific person if you do care about these classic games and you are playing very specific titles, because another aspect of the expansion pack is you get DLC for certain titles for free, like the Booster Course Pass, Animal Crossing's Happy Home Paradise DLC, Splatoon 2's Octo expansion got included, and then the Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild Switch 2 edition upgrades are just available for free if you have the expansion pack. So for $50 a year, a lot of this stuff, like, it definitely does add up to that. I mean, the Booster Course Pass alone is $25, and this is $50 a year, so you're already getting like half the value of that. And then in addition, you know, you have all this extra DLC, and then all of these classic games that are substantial. You know, GameCube games are substantial. In many cases, a lot of GameCube games have a similar amount of content to modern releases. Of course, the thing is, $50 a year, that's a reoccurring fee. So, you know, after 2 years, it's going to be $100. After 3, $150. But you do get all of this in addition to everything from Switch Online at $20. I would honestly put this in the fair deal category, because Switch Online is more of a necessity because, you know, you get the online multiplayer. It has more things that are a bit more like necessary for you, which I think is kind of annoying that, some of this stuff is behind a paywall, but at the same time, that's just kind of the standard these days. And I think baseline for $20, I mean, you get a bunch of stuff there. The Switch Online expansion pack is a lot more of like a little bonus thing. If you're serious about your stuff, then boom, get the expansion pack. And you do get a good chunk of stuff, but for the most part, it is just a couple of packs of DLC and more classic game systems. And I do feel like that is harder to justify, but I do think it is fair for the price. I do think in many ways they do over-deliver on some of the value here. However, you do have to be a very specific customer. You know, it's great that they're offering a lot of this DLC for free, but at the same time, this isn't a value to you if you aren't already playing some of these games. And for being Nintendo Switch Online, stuff like, you know, the Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom upgrade packs being free, it's just like, well, these aren't even online games. At least with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, it's like, well, you play that online a bunch, so it kind of, you know, it goes hand in hand. It kind of makes sense. But I would say it's fair just because it's definitely more of a niche product. Might as well keep talking about Nintendo's classic game prices. I just want to talk about the OG Virtual Console prices. So with this, you know, these were always pretty damn consistent. On the Wii and Wii U, NES games were $5, SNES games were $8, N64 was $10. Now, I think kind of a weird element is you had import games. Import games were always more expensive. On NES, like, you would pay $6 for a game that never came out in North America. And I always thought that was stupid because Nintendo never translated anything with these games. They never actually localized these games. They literally just dumped the Japanese ROM of these games on storefronts, and they charged more for it with a little Japanese flag in the corner to be like, oh, this is a fancy little import. And I'm just kind of going like, this is a digital file, man. What are we doing? Now, a lot of these prices were the exact same on Wii U, but I did find that Nintendo was more willing to give discounts and whatnot on Wii U. I saw more sales occurring, and if you transferred your Wii data to Wii U, you could play the Wii Virtual Console versions in Wii mode on Wii U. But if you wanted to buy the Wii U version of that Virtual Console game, you get it at a discount. Like NES games were like $1 if you already bought them on Wii, which I do think it was kind of annoying that, like, what, I gotta pay another $1 to play Super Mario Brothers 1 on the gamepad. But to be fair, it's also kind of like, you know, you can kind of pick and choose, like, which games do you really want to play again on Wii U? And $1, it's not that big of a deal. I think SNES games were like $1.50. And on 3DS, games were a bit cheaper for, like, Game Boy and whatnot. I think these prices were decent enough. Like, it definitely made sense, but it like the fact that all games across the entire platform basically were certain prices, except for certain situations, like Earthbound on Wii U eShop was like $10, even though SNES games were $8. And I always thought it's just like, come on, buddy. Like, they just did that because they knew this was a high-in-demand game and it was a big deal. So they were like, all right, we're charging a little more for it. I didn't really have a problem with the price points, but I think where it got weird was the fact that, like, pretty much, oh, all NES games were $5. Well, if you were buying, like, Super Mario Brothers 3, that's a great deal for Mario 3. If you were buying fucking soccer on NES, that's an awful deal for soccer on NES. Like, I feel like it should have been a little more varied based on which game we're talking about here. So I do think I would put the Virtual Console prices in the fair deal category, just because, I mean, like, you know, you kind of knew. Who doesn't know soccer and NES is a bad deal? I didn't. As a kid, I played recreational soccer, so when I saw soccer on the Wii Shop channel, I was kind of like, oh. And I played it for like 10 minutes. I was just like, oh. But overall, I mean, the good games were at great prices. I mean, like, you could get, like, some of the best games of all time for like $8, you know, like A Link to the Past for $8. Like, that's insane. All right, let's talk the original Wii U price. I'm talking launch price here for $350 for the deluxe set, because the deluxe set is the one that you wanted to get. I mean, like, they priced the basic set at $300, but that's kind of like, they just did that so then the Wii U would start at $300. But I think the deluxe set is what Nintendo envisioned, is just like, yep, this is what the Wii U should be. Like, you definitely need 32 gigs of storage. Nintendo Land included makes all the sense in the world. This was a good deal compared to the basic set. I think the basic set was a dog-ass deal. $300, 8 gigs, no game included, and then the deluxe set, Nintendo Land on its own, like on store shelves, that game cost $59.99. So just with Nintendo Land included alone, you were saving $10 with the deluxe set. And it included all this other stuff. I'm putting the basic set in the bad deal category. I wouldn't call it a complete ripoff, but I don't think, like, that was stupid for anybody to buy. Now, the deluxe set, I think, was a great deal compared to the basic set, but I do want to consider the Wii U's price in general in 2012 and in 2013, and yeah, I don't think it was worth it. Here's the thing, the Wii U had good games and stuff, but, you know, buying this thing for $350 in 2012, compared to an Xbox 360 or PS3, which got more games, better games, all the multi-platform games on Wii U just were not the greatest. They were oftentimes more expensive on Wii U. They were missing features. They were missing content. And by comparison, you could get like an Xbox 360 in 2012, 2013 for like $150, $100. Like, I remember the Xbox 360 on Black Friday in 2013 was like $99. The Wii U was $300, and the Wii U was comparable to the Xbox 360 in terms of power. And you had some good games on Wii U, but I don't think at that time there was nothing that was like, oh my God, jaw-dropping enough to like drop everything and be like, oh yeah, this was a sound investment. I would put the deluxe set in the meh deal category because it is better than the basic set. It does give you more value, and you do get a better deal overall. In addition to the fact that, like, at the launch of the Wii U, you got like the digital deluxe promotion, where for a couple of years there, anything you buy on the Nintendo eShop, you'd get like points back, and then you could exchange those points for like $5 gift cards. So I remember actually getting a fair amount of gift cards by buying my deluxe set and getting like a couple of cool eShop games basically for free. So that's something. So I think it's a good deal compared to the basic set, but, you know, like, considering that it's the Wii U, I think it's a meh deal. Well, then what about the original Wii's price at $250? Now, this was always seen as kind of like, this was like the affordable console. But in reality, like, for only $50 more, you can get an Xbox 360 for $300. So while the Wii was the most affordable console of the 7th generation, when you consider the power level of it being around like an original Xbox, and then you have the sequel to the original Xbox, the Xbox 360, available for only $50 more, albeit it was kind of a crappy version of the 360, you know, like it didn't have a hard drive or anything, but still, it does put things into perspective. But the Wii did have a lot going for it. The fact that you do have like full GameCube backwards compatibility straight out of the box here, and you did get Wii Sports bundled in for free. I would say the Wii in 2006 at $250, I'm kind of going between fair deal and good deal. You know, I would honestly say good deal. I think if you buy that for $250, I think the GameCube around this time was $100. So for $150 more, you get basically everything you get with a GameCube, and also this fancy new controller and a fancy game that everybody wanted, which was Wii Sports. And even if you just kind of wanted to be a bum and just play nothing but games released on like the Wii Shop channel, I mean, like, you pretty much have like this all-in-one Nintendo device at the time, where the games, again, you know, you look at the virtual console prices, you could just buy a bunch of like great NES games for like $5 a pop. Honestly, even if you weren't gonna play Wii games, I think in 2006 that was a good deal. So yeah, I'm gonna put the original Wii under good deal. Now, over the years, the Wii got different bundles and SKUs and different redesigns and price cuts. And one of the price cuts it got was in 2011. It went down to $149.99. And this was the bundle that got introduced with that price cut. You got a Wii in either white or black, and you got a Wii Remote Plus, so it had Motion Plus built in, and you got Mario Kart Wii included with a Wii wheel for $150. So Mario Kart Wii is an interesting inclusion because that game was like $50 with the Wii wheel included. So basically, Nintendo was selling you a Wii for $100 because Mario Kart Wii is like a full price game. You know, originally with Wii Sports included, like Wii Sports was always an incredible pack-in, but Wii Sports is, you know, a smaller title. You know, it is more of kind of like a little tech demo, a fleshed out tech demo. But kind of still like, you know, a smaller package overall. We want to keep in mind this is 2011, so kind of the Wii craze has significantly died down by this point. But I would say Mario Kart Wii is such a massive game, and also getting the Wii wheel included for free is kind of cool, even if it is just kind of a hunk of plastic. I mean, honestly, after 5 years, getting $100 knocked down, that makes a lot of sense. I would put this in fair deal, just because considering the time it came out, the Wii has definitely lost a lot of its luster. It's not as exciting, but for what it is, this is a completely reasonable price and product configuration for this time in the Wii's life. However, by comparison, this bundle released a few months later in 2011. This was still the exact same year, and it was similarly $150. But this was a stranger bundle because this featured the Wii redesign. You know, in other countries, this was called the Wii Family Edition, and it's basically the exact same as the original Wii, but it's flipped on its side, so all the lettering is on its side, and it doesn't have the fun little silver stand, and no GameCube functionality. The fact that they ripped GameCube support out of this thing is pretty rough, though to be fair, at this point, anybody that was annoyed that Nintendo got rid of GameCube support, it is something that's like, well, if you're annoyed that you got rid of it in 2011, don't you guys already have a Wii? Like, if you don't have a Wii at this point, I don't think you care about having GameCube functionality in the system. So I get it, but also with this being the same price as a bundle they announced in May 2011, and this one they announced in October 2011, and they ripped out functionality, and it has new Super Mario Bros. Wii included, which is nice, but that's also kind of the same value as Mario Kart Wii, and I would say Mario Kart Wii is the better game. But for them, for some reason, they throw in a soundtrack CD for Super Mario Galaxy. And I'm like, one, that's not the damn game in the bundle. And two, the Wii can't play audio CDs. So I kind of appreciate the inclusion, but it's also like, what are we doing here? I'm putting this in meh deal just because, like, it is definitely worse than the Mario Kart bundle. It's a worse value. I don't think it's like awful or anything. It's just a worse value overall. Like, there's no getting around that. Now we have the Wii Mini. The Wii Mini is funny because this console is even worse than the Wii Family Edition. They ripped out not only GameCube support, but they ripped out internet connectivity. You cannot connect online with the Wii Mini. It is kind of a funky little red and black retro design. I like that about it, but overall, like, this console is the worst Wii you could own. However, this console cost $100, and if you add up everything together, Mario Kart Wii standalone in 2013 when this released was a $40 game. A Wii Remote Plus is $40, and then a Nunchuck was $20. So when you add up everything outside of the Wii Mini console itself, it would cost $100. So at that point, they were giving you the Wii Mini for free. So at that point, I have to give it a good deal. I'm not gonna call it an amazing deal. There's a lot going on there to warrant buying this. Like you know, like if you were in the market to want to buy Mario Kart Wii, are you really gonna buy this whole ass console and then you have to deal with this fucking Wii Mini that you don't want to do anything with just to warrant getting Mario Kart Wii and a new Wii Remote and Nunchuck? Like, yeah, it's a good deal, but it's also like, part of me wouldn't even want to deal with a Wii Mini. But still, I can't deny it is a good deal. All right, now, folks, we have to talk about the Nintendo Switch family of systems. And this is kind of the hard thing because these systems all launched at certain prices, and since, due to economic situations, all of these systems have increased in price over time, which I think is a bit absurd, but we will just be talking about their launch prices. Because pretty much all of these, like, what, the Nintendo Switch OLED got its price raised to $400, I would probably put that in complete ripoff territory. But I just want to talk about their launch prices. So, Nintendo Switch originally cost $300. I would put that in fair. That was the exact same price that the Wii U was at the time. And in most cases, you generally see like the next generation console cost more than the previous one. And in this was an interesting case where it was the exact same price as Wii U. I remember seeing some people say like, man, I hope it hits that Wii price of $250. And in retrospect, I'm like, that was never gonna happen, man. Like why would this thing be less expensive than a Wii U? The fact that it was the same price and it was, you know, a more capable console and it had a more compelling gimmick and a more interesting gimmick. And hey, this was the console that we didn't know this at the time, but it was pretty much gonna last for like nearly a decade. So it's just like, yeah, this was a great investment. But at the time, I think that was a completely fair deal. The Nintendo Switch Lite at $200, you know, I would pretty much recommend to everybody to just save up a little more, get a regular Nintendo Switch, just because the Switch Lite, I never liked the fact that this thing could never connect to a TV. I think I would have really appreciated if Nintendo, even if Nintendo offered a dock for $100 or something, but a dock that you could just buy separately and then you could connect your Switch Lite to a TV. I didn't like that they never offered that. I think that would have been really nice because then you wouldn't be like buying yourself into a corner with the Switch Lite. To be fair, I think anybody that's ever asked me like, hey, I want to buy a Switch, which one should I buy? I asked them like, do you like playing games on the TV? A lot of them just say like, no, I don't care. You know, and I'm like, that's completely fair. But some games, you know, like you might end up thinking like, hey, you know, I kind of want to play Mario Kart with all my friends at a party or something. And, you know, like in that case, like it's really nice to have the dock. It's really nice to have the detachable controllers. And there's just random games. There's not a ton, but there are games where like the Switch Lite just doesn't make any sense. Now, $100 off is significant, but I do think like if you can afford $200, I would probably just say, hey, save your money, save up, and then just get the regular Switch so then you don't have to regret anything at the end of the day, because the regular Switch is compatible with everything. You don't have to think about anything. I would put this in meh deal just because I wouldn't recommend this to most people. There are some people that I'd say like, it makes sense for you, but for the most part, I would always just save up for a regular Switch. Now, the OLED being $50 more than a regular Switch, I think it makes sense in some cases. I mean, you do get double the internal storage at 64 gigabytes, and the OLED screen looks great. I love the OLED screen of the Switch OLED, and the screen is also a little bit bigger, which is nice. But they also have like random stuff, like there's an Ethernet port on the dock. Like, I just think there's certain things that are kind of weird about the Switch OLED that really do feel like this was meant to be like a Switch Pro type device where the internals are enhanced in some way. But then they decided to just kind of course correct and just make it about the screen and a couple of small little enhancements. So this fundamentally was just kind of a more premium Switch you could buy if you wanted such a thing. And I think it goes in meh deal as well. Like, I think you get everything that you need with the normal Switch at $300. For an extra $50, you know, like, to be fair, I honestly think the increased storage capacity is probably, like, one of the better things there. But then again, storage has just been getting cheaper and cheaper. Back in, like, 2010, an extra $50 for another 32 gigs of storage was more common. But nowadays, like, you look at like storage prices and it's just like, no, like for an extra $50, I think you could have done like a little bit extra storage. But at the same time, you do get the OLED screen, and the OLED screen looks beautiful. I think meh deal makes the most sense. It's unnecessary, but you know, like, it is what it is. Like, I don't think you need to get that, but it's like, it's not the worst price in the world. It makes sense for certain people, but it's not for everybody. Now let's talk about the Switch 2, because the Switch 2's price has always been up for debate. Though I would say, out of all the bullshit surrounding Nintendo's pricing of the Switch 2 era, I think the Nintendo Switch 2 itself at launch at $450 for the base console, I don't think is the worst thing in the world. It's not a sexy price at all. $450 just looks kind of strange, but at the end of the day, I do think it makes sense when you look at what the Switch 1 costs, and the Switch 1 never got a price drop, which is silly. But compared to the Switch 1 being like $100 more than what the Switch OLED costs, I think makes sense. Like, this is a far more powerful console, far more capable console. Hell, it runs Nintendo Switch 1 games better for the most part. I would put it in fair deal. Like, I don't think the price is ridiculous or anything. It's not something that I look at and I go, wow, that's a great price. Like, no. But I do look at it with everything that you get with the Switch 2. It's a fair price. And then we have Pokemon Rumble U on the Wii U eShop. That was $18. That game sucks ass. That's going in complete ripoff territory. All right, so that was a lot. But what did we learn here today? Well, if we look at everything that I ranked, you know, at the top of the charts and then at the bottom, I can see that Nintendo has consistently had weird prices. Now, I do think recently they've gotten way too ballsy with their prices, and they will price things way too high when I don't think it deserves to be that high. But as many things from the Wii and Wii U era that I'm seeing in the amazing deal category, I'm also seeing a lot of stuff in the bad deal and complete ripoff territory. And then for me personally, a lot of Nintendo's like recent pricing kind of falls in the meh deal category, where I'm just like, yeah, this is an annoying price. I don't think it's like a complete ripoff though, but it's not great. But I think it just goes to show like Nintendo has consistently kind of been weird with prices. I do think they've gotten way too high lately, but they've done this kind of stuff in the past, even if they were more willing to cut us a deal back in the day. Not with Pokemon Rumble U, that's for damn sure.